And we are live. Welcome to the MLB Deeper Dive. It is Friday, September 24th. I am Josh Engelman. I am joined by Adam Scher, and we have 15 games to get through. It's going to be a lot, but I promise you guys we'll have no problem doing it. What you guys need to do right now, though, is hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you know when everything goes live. And don't be afraid to give a little bit of a shout out to our presenting sponsor. That would be Jock Market. Let's start here quickly. Adam, how are you?
Doing pretty good. Said this morning, I feel like we haven't had a 15-game slate in a really long time. We've had like 3-day games and then 12 games at night. So a little bit different, but I think slates like that are pretty fun because, ownership comes down. You kind of can play good plays a little bit easier.
Sure. Yeah, I don't feel like you and we've definitely had some 14s from time to time, but I don't think we've had all 15 in a pretty long time, at least. Yeah. So we're going to dig into all of them. And I don't think that we have the time to dilly-dally. So I'm ready if you are.
Yep, let's go.
All right, we're diving in right out of the gate with your Orioles taking on the Rangers. 4.6 run implied total for the O's. 4.7 for the Rangers. Alex Wells and Spencer Howard. Neither guy pulling any ownership. They're both basically the same price, 5,100 and 5,200. How do you feel about going to either one of these guys as a paydown option?
Not particularly interested. Alex Wells, not any good. Has struck out, I think, 10% of right-handed hitters this year, pulling that up now. But 10.7% of right-handed hitters this season, 25.6% of lefties, but that doesn't do you a whole lot of good when there's only one left-handed hitter in the opposing lineup. He's allowed a 449 WOBA, 425 expected WOBA to righties. Granted, Texas is a terrible offense, but still a 4.8 implied run total for Texas. And then on the other side, a 4.8 implied run total for the Orioles as well. Howard just doesn't go deep enough into games for me to want to get there. It's not a spot where I'm looking to pitching. 57 pitches last time out for Howard, 51 the start before that. Just can't really expect him to get more than a couple of innings here.
I assume it is a place that you're at least a little bit interested in offenses. I'm curious, though, which team stands out more to you from a bats perspective?
I actually think Texas stands out a little bit more, which is weird to say. We don't have an Orioles lineup yet, so it's possible that we get a good lineup there. If Santander is in and Mancini and Hayes and Mountcastle and Mullins, that would make the Orioles more appealing, but we don't know if Santander is going to be in. If he's out, that lineup just gets so thin really quickly, whereas Texas has some pretty favorable pricing here. You have Connor Falefa leading off at 3,500, pay down shortstop option. You have Nick Solak batting fifth at 3,300. Adolis Garcia is back in the lineup, hitting third at 4,700. I think all those guys look pretty good. Ibanez on FanDuel is only 2,800, hitting second, so looks a lot better on FanDuel than he does on DraftKings. But I actually think Texas is in a pretty good spot here, given Wells' lack of ability to strike out right-handed hitters and the fact that he has just gotten torched by them so far this season.
Yeah, I actually had the Rangers coming in fourth in my sim. And the Orioles not too far behind. This is a sneaky decent game from a hitting perspective. Obviously, the park helps quite a bit. Even in late September, still going to be better than most. Favorite bat in the game?
Mullins at 4,200.
Okay. I'm pulling up our top tool now just to make sure I see where we stand.
Basically, everybody's the same except for the Giants and the Dodgers.
That makes some sense. Oh boy. Okay, that's a big number on the Giants. So it's the Giants, then the Dodgers, and then the entire league. Good to know. Good to know. So I don't have anything else for Orioles and Rangers. They just look like two teams that you should be getting to if you're not already going to Colorado.
Yeah, it's two teams where I think if the slate were smaller, you would be getting a lot of ownership going to different parts here. But because the slate is as big as it is and you have that Coors Field game, right now we have Cedric Mullins as the only hitter in the game projected above 10% ownership. So good spot to target some bats.
All right. Let's move it on to Phillies and Pirates. 5.3 run implied total for the Phillies, 3.5 for the Pirates. Kyle Gibson and Sam Howard. No one rostering Sam Howard because he's only going to go like an inning. This is a bullpen game. 23% ownership coming into Kyle Gibson. And to me, I think that is pretty reasonable for 7,900 and a matchup against the Pirates.
Yeah, completely agree. Kind of a weird pitching slate where there are a few good pitchers or a couple good pitchers that we expect to be limited. Then there's also some good strikeout pitchers in completely mediocre matchups. Gibson's the opposite of those guys. Doesn't have very good strikeout stuff, only about a 20% strikeout percentage for the season. But Pittsburgh's been one of the least productive offenses all year long. Since the trade deadline, no exception, 83 WRC plus, 23% strikeout percentage for their active roster. The lineup they're running out there is decent, I guess, by Pittsburgh standards. They do have Tsutsugo in the lineup. That's another bat that can do some damage. You have Reynolds and Moran and Hayes in there, but it's still overall just a weak Pittsburgh offense. You also get the pitcher spot as well. Gibson leads the slate in ground ball percentage. So he doesn't give you the same, raw strikeout upside that some of the other pitchers on this slate do, but he does have one of the best matchups on the slate. So at 7,900, I have no issues with him.
He showed up in 18% of my sims, so basically right on the ownership number. I don't have much to add there. I do think the Phillies stand out. I generally do, though, but they may be a little overowned. I don't know, it's probably pretty neutral. They are my number 5 stack. I'd be happy to get to some of the Phillies, particularly that first part of the order. How are they looking for you against this Pirates bullpen?
Yeah, kind of surprised their top stack percentage isn't a little bit higher. It's a good park. Granted, it's only about 65 degrees today. Don't typically like targeting bullpen games, but the Pirates do have a pretty weak bullpen. I don't expect Howard to go deep into this game at all. He's actually averaged less than an inning pitched per appearance this year, which is pretty weird to see when you have to face 3 batters every time you come in. So not expecting him to go, far into this game at all. It's a true bullpen game as far as I know. You do just have good hitters in this lineup. Real Muto is back in the lineup, batting cleanup. Pretty good price tag on Brad Miller hitting 5th. Yes, it's lefty to start the game, but again, you're not expecting Howard to go very far. So you should get right-handed pitching at some point going up against Miller. McCutcheon's cheap. So it's pretty much, the top of the order is kind of expensive, but they're also good. And then as it drops off, going on the lineup, you get some value. So I do like the Phillies here. They're getting probably the ownership they deserve. But again, with this being a 15-game slate and so much ownership going to Coors Field, I am not particularly concerned about Phillies ownership. Harper, the only guy on DraftKings projected for more than 10% ownership.
Any justification to go to the Pirates bats on the opposite side of Kyle Gibson's ownership?
I don't mind going to Tsutsugo for value. He's only 3,400 on DraftKings. He has first base outfield eligibility, so you can roster him at 4 spots. I think that's a pretty decent spot to go to if you're looking for a bat against Gibson. But overall, the Pirates are just such a bad offense. It's really hard for me to, get to them on a slate with 29 other offenses.
Yeah, we're on the same page there. Just looking at it right now, Tsutsugo and Hayes are the only guys that showed up in more than 1% of my lineups, and they only showed up in 2. So I don't have too much to add, but I do think the Phillies look good. So Phillies and Kyle Gibson as a combination. I don't mean like you have to play them together, but just both sides of the Phillies pitching and hitting, I think are pretty nice today.
Yep, agreed.
Cleveland and the White Sox. 3.9 run implied total for Cleveland, 4.1 for Chicago. Shane Bieber and Dylan Cease. Shane Bieber is 11,300, which makes him unrosterable today. Dylan Cease is 9K, projected for 33% ownership. I think it's a really nice spot for Cease, but 33% feels a bit too high today.
Yeah, it's kind of weird because he projects really, really well. We have him projected as the top scoring pitcher in the most recent projection update. And I don't really disagree with that. He's got a 31.6% strikeout percentage this year, 3.8 xFIP, but it is a pretty neutral matchup against the Indians. Since the trade deadline, 101 WRC plus. They don't strike out at a particularly high rate. They, since the trade deadline, have a 23.4% strikeout percentage. So basically average there, 101 WRC plus, like I mentioned, 318 WOBA. It's just a neutral spot. So I understand why Cease projects well. I understand why he's going to get ownership. I think he's a good play, but this isn't one of those spots. It's not, the Aaron Nola spot last night where I just really had trouble getting away from it. It's not Zach Wheeler the night before against the Orioles. It wouldn't be surprising at all if Cease just, has a kind of average game here. And at 9K, there are, some alternatives to him. So the way I'm viewing it is I think he's one of the best cash options. I think he's a good option in tournaments as long as, you have lower owned guys throughout your lineup. But if I'm going with, if I'm going with the Giants or if I'm just going with more popular hitters, I'm not particularly scared to move away from Cease to some of these other guys.
Yeah, we're on the same page. I got him pretty significantly less in terms of ownership, but he still looks great. Like he's the guy that I prioritize in that salary range. I just don't want to prioritize him in 33% of my lineups. I assume we're on the same page here. Bieber's not going deep enough in this game to pay 11.3 for him.
Yeah, I can't see paying that price tag for what we're assuming is going to be like 75 pitches.
Yeah, I gave him 4 innings. Not going to get it done. But he's still Shane Bieber, and Dylan Cease is good, not great, in my opinion. I don't really like the offenses on either side of this game. I mean, there's certainly power to be found here, but doesn't strike me as a spot that I'm going to try to get a lot of offense. Do you like either team?
No, not really. This is a game where I think on smaller slates, I'd be more interested in the offenses. You could, certainly make a case for guys like Jose Ramirez pretty much always. And then on the other side, a point Greg made this morning that I agree with, we don't know exactly what version of Shane Bieber we're getting here, in his first start back from injury. So there is a little bit wider range of outcomes for the White Sox than you would typically have against Bieber, but it's just not a spot that I'm really looking to chase down on this particular slate.
Favorite bat in the game? Because no one's owned.
Yeah, I mean, I guess Jose Ramirez, just because he's Jose Ramirez. You can use him as a pivot away from, Chris Bryant, Evan Longoria, those guys.
Jose Ramirez was the guy that showed up the most in my sims at 5%. Only guy getting ownership on the hitting side, and either team is Moncada at 2%. So fascinating. I've got nothing else for Cleveland and the White Sox. Keep your eye on that Dylan Cease ownership. Red Sox and Yankees. 4.4 run implied total for the Red Sox, 4.6 for the Yankees, and apparently no Santander in the Orioles lineup per Baldy and the Oaf. Nathan Eovaldi and Garrett Cole on the hill here. Eovaldi at 9,700, not really pulling much ownership up against the Yankees. Garrett Cole at 10,800 against the Red Sox, still getting to 15% ownership. I'd be okay to have a little bit more. What do you want to do with Cole?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting spot for Cole because on the one hand, it's a brutal matchup against Boston. They don't strike out. They are one of the most productive offenses in the league. So it's, just not a good spot. But on the other hand, he leads the slate with a 34.2% strikeout percentage. He's tied with Bieber for the best xFIP on the slate this year at 2.87. He's only pulling 15% ownership. It's just so unusual to get a slate where Garrett Cole's not really that popular, and he still gives you a massive ceiling. And one other thing working in his favor is the Yankees need to win these games. So, or win this game, but win games the rest of the season. So I think one thing to keep in mind is if Cole is pitching well, they're going to just let him keep going. When you talk about someone like Dylan Cease, I think it's pretty likely that even if he's pitching well, there's no time where Tony La Russa is like, okay, go back out there and get up to 110 pitches because the White Sox they're not playing for anything at this point. So I think that top end salary or top end ceiling is actually a little bit higher for Cole relative to other pitchers as well. So that's something working in his favor. But, again, still a really, really difficult matchup. So not some, it feels weird, but not somebody I plan on having in cash in tournaments. I'm obviously fine getting there because the ownership is relatively low, but it's clearly a bad spot.
You don't think it's possible that La Russa is too drunk and forgets to take Cease out?
that is possible, I guess.
The man does like the sauce. Oh boy, Eovaldi.
Yeah, it's tough. He's expensive. He's 9,700, only pulling 3% ownership on DraftKings. So I do think there's a case to be made. We talked about Dylan Cease at 33%. There's a case to be made where if you have a chalkier lineup and you're going into that price range, getting to Eovaldi, who is a good pitcher. There is some strikeout upside going against the Yankees, but he's a little bit more expensive than I'd like to pay for. And there is one other pitcher in this price range that I prefer as a tournament pivot as well.
Bats is going to be a tough sell here. Like getting to the Red Sox bats against Cole doesn't feel all that great. He's not even getting enough ownership to really make it feel good. And then Yankees bats against Eovaldi. He's not the type of guy that gets like legitimately blown up. Certainly enough power to be grabbing one-offs. I don't mind the Yankee stack. They are 8th, but I don't see either team being a priority.
Yeah, I mean, that's where I'm at as well. I'm not going to be upset about getting into some Yankees or getting into some Red Sox just because they are such good offenses, but it's pretty hard to prioritize taking bats against Garrett Cole or taking bats against Nathan Eovaldi when there's some, just bad pitching on the slate. So they do both have relatively high implied run totals, 4.5 for Boston, 4.6 for the Yankees, which is kind of surprising given the pitching matchup. But we also have both teams basically pulling the ownership that they deserve. So no real strong take one way or the other for me there.
All righty. Favorite bat in the game, since it's a big one. Hard to pick one, obviously.
Yeah. Probably Gallo from the Yankees side and Schwarber from the Red Sox side.
Perfect.
Actually, on DraftKings, I'll throw out Verdugo at 2,900.
Oh, yeah, I like that. Scheduled for the rest of the night. Just got one. MLB Live Before Lock coming up immediately after this. Greg and Terry will break it all down, heading up to 7:05's lock. MLB ownership is free today, so if you're looking to follow along there, you can do that. Plus, NFL top stacks are also free. If you're playing NFL this week, you should check that out right now. We move on to game number 5, Tigers and Royals. 4.4 run implied total for the Tigers, 4.3 for the Royals. Casey Mize and Carlos Hernandez. Hernandez getting a little bit of love here. 11% owned on DraftKings at 5,500. I actually got him at 15% in my sim. So I agree with the public. I'm happy to get some Carlos Hernandez in a really nice strikeout matchup against the Tigers.
Yeah, it's a good strikeout matchup. The concern is that he's been pretty bad as a starter this year. Only a 16.8% strikeout percentage. He's walked 10.5% of hitters, 5.28 xFIP. The numbers don't really look good for him as a starter. The success he's had this year was driven by his time in the bullpen. But that being said, you do have plenty of strikeouts in the Tigers lineup. And he's only 5,500. So there's one Logan Gilbert pulling tons and tons and tons of ownership in that price range. And I think deservedly so. And we'll talk about him later. But I do think Hernandez is a viable pivot away from that 40% Logan Gilbert ownership. Hernandez, $900 less expensive on DraftKings, only getting 10% ownership. I'm not very confident in him. I actually don't even mind going to some Tigers bats, but I do think that he just, he works if you have popular hitters and you're trying to save a little bit of salary on a cheap SP2, or a little bit of ownership rather, on a cheap SP2.
Talk to me about these Tigers bats, because I don't see the same thing that you do.
I don't think Hernandez is very good.
Okay.
So
that works.
Yeah, I mean, Akil Baddoo 4,100 I think is a pretty solid option. Scopes down to 4,300. Grossman's 4,400. Like they're not a great offense. Obviously, they don't have a huge they're not particularly likely to have success. But I do like hitters in Detroit, and I think that Hernandez just really has struggled as a starter.
Okay. Do you have any interest in the Royals bats? I think they're the better offense here, but they're not super appealing. I would just be picking out the Merrifields and Salvador Perez's of the world. Yeah,
Mize has really struggled with left-handed hitters this year, so that does bump guys like Nicky Lopez, Benintendi, Santana, an insanely expensive Adalberto Mondesi. Even O'Hearn, I think, looks like a pretty good option. And then obviously Salvador Perez and Merrifield, you can play against anybody, especially Perez. I'm not sure how deep into the game we should expect Mize to go. We have seen the Tigers, dial him back a bit recently. We saw them do that going into the All-Star break. They're doing it going to the end of the season as well. Hasn't thrown 80 pitches in any of his last 5 starts, hasn't reached 60 in any of his last 3. So I'm assuming you're getting, 3-4 innings or so out of Mize, and then you're getting to the Tigers bullpen. So I do like Kansas City here. I wish that Mondesi wasn't so expensive, because he would definitely be someone that I would want to include in my stacks. But I think you can also offset that when you have, a $2,800 Santana, you have a $2,500 O'Hearn. I guess, across 5 players, it's not the most expensive team.
Anything else here? By the way, I have the Royals 13th. I have the Tigers 18th. So firmly in the middle of the pack for both sides.
Yeah.
Anything else?
We have Kansas City. It looks like 10th or 11th, but they're just in that group of teams that are like between 3 and 5%.
Yeah. The actual ranks there are, you can move those guys around pretty easily. They're in the middle. That's all. They're definitely not in course.
Right. Exactly.
Let's keep this bad boy moving then. Rays and Marlins. 5.3 run implied total for the Rays, 3.3 for the Marlins. I've got Ryan Yarbrough as the long man, Edward Cabrera going for the Marlins. No ownership coming to Cabrera. Do you expect, if it is in fact Ryan Yarbrough, I assume you've seen the same, do you have any interest there at 7,200 in a great matchup against the Marlins?
Yeah, I mean, great matchup. Yarbrough, a pretty average pitcher, but seems like he's expected to pitch behind Robertson today, assuming that means you're getting, 5-ish innings from Yarbrough. At 7,200, I think that's reasonable in tournaments. There's not really, there's not much pitching in that particular price range. Like you have the cheaper guys, you have the more expensive guys. All that there really is between 7 and 8K is Kyle Gibson at 7,900. So I think 7,200 for Yarbrough probably just fits pretty nicely into some lineups. There is always, the concern that he doesn't throw as many innings as the long guy, as he would as a starter. But the matchup clearly very good against Miami. They're in Tropicana, which is a good place to pitch. So I do like Yarbrough.
Came up at 9% of my sim, so I think that feels pretty good. What surprised me, and I don't know if it's just a sign of what Steamer thinks of Edward Cabrera, but I'm lighter on the Rays than I was expecting to be. They are my number 20 stack. I thought that they would rank a bit higher because obviously it's a fantastic offense, but Steamer's got Edward Cabrera at a 4.07 FIP. What do you want to do with Tampa?
Did you say with him or with Tampa?
With Tampa. Oh, unless you want to go to Edward Cabrera at 6,200.
Well, no, all I was going to say about Cabrera is that he is a highly regarded prospect. He does He did have good strikeout stuff in the minors, hasn't translated to the majors yet, but in the massive field tournaments, if you wanted to use him as a pivot away from Gilbert, I think that's fine. A low probability play, but getting no ownership. But outside of that, nothing really to say there. As far as Tampa goes, though, I do like getting to the Rays. Wander Franco's back in the lineup, so that makes the lineup better. You have G-Man Choi hitting third at 3,300. That helps you offset some salary. Meadows is relatively inexpensive as well. Nobody's really priced up except for the Lau, Franco, and Cruz trio. And Cabrera is a highly regarded prospect, but he has also struggled so far this season. As a starter with Miami in a limited sample, 2.2 home runs per 9, only a 3.3% K minus BB percentage, striking out 17.4% of hitters, walking 14.1%, 5.67 xFIP. A 5.3 implied run total for Tampa in Tropicana is pretty high, and I just really like the lineup that they have running out there today. There's really nothing. There's no holes in this lineup until you get down to 8-9 with Mejia and Kiermaier. But I think it's a very, very good Tampa lineup, and Cabrera really hasn't had success at the major league level yet. He's allowed a 422 expected WOBA to righties, 486 to lefties. Again, very small sample, but so far he has not really shown anything.
How are you feeling about Marlins bets?
Not great.
I got him 29th. I'm going to go ahead and keep it moving here.
Yeah, works for me.
Reds and Nats, 4.9 run implied total for the Reds, 3.8 for the Nats. Sonny Gray, Paolo Espino, no ownership going to Espino, 27% going to Sonny Gray. I'm curious, how do you feel about that? He's 80. Your boy's 8,600.
Yeah, it seems about right to me. I don't like the strikeout matchup here. The Nats are a very difficult team to strike out. Since the trade deadline, they've only struck out 19.8% of the time. They also have a 107 WRC plus, but I think that is in large part driven by Juan Soto being insanely good. So I'm not as concerned about the level of production the Nats have had as I am about the fact that they are difficult to strike out. But still, you have Gray at a pretty cheap price point for someone that has his stuff. He's struck out 27.5% of hitters this year. The only pitchers on this slate with higher strikeout percentages are Cole, Bieber, who we expect to be limited, and Cease. He has a 3.59 xFIP. He has the sixth best ground ball percentage. He's just a good pitcher at a very reasonable price tag on a slate where there's not a whole lot of good pitchers in good, clear good matchups. So I'm not, as concerned about the fact he's facing the Nats, who are tough to strike out, as I would be if, for example, Cease were facing the Pirates or something like that.
Okay. Can you justify Paulo Espino at 6,600?
I don't think so. It's a pretty tough sell for me. He's been better than I expected him to be. I'm no longer calling him the worst regular starting pitcher in baseball, but still only a 21% strikeout percentage this year, 4.3 xFIP, 1.5 home runs per 9. The Reds lineup is more or less what you would expect it to be. We know Winker isn't going to be in there, but India, Castellanos, Votto, all in there. So I could see Espino as just a low owned pivot to Gilbert, but there's nothing that really stands out to me. Nearly a 5 implied run total for the Reds. In most lineups, I'm going to prefer just getting to Logan Gilbert.
I would like to get to the Reds. I have them pretty highly ranked as a stack, quite a bit higher than our top stack tool has them, and completely underowned. I like the idea of attacking Espino here. So it's not that I think that the Reds are a particularly good team, but it's certainly a home run park, and it's certainly a pitcher that isn't very good. So I really like Cincinnati in GPPs.
Yeah, I'm there with you. I really like Castellanos. I think that it is going to be sort of difficult to get him into lineups because there are so many, other expensive bats to pay up for. But Espino has really struggled with right-handed power in particular this year. 237 expected ISO. You have Castellanos, who has tons of tons of power from the right side. I think India's fine. Farmer, Suarez, those guys are fine as well. But Castellanos really stands out, I think, as the top guy for me from the Reds. Votto, a good option. Lefty. It's Espino has been better against lefties, but I'm not going to hold that against Joey Votto. But individually, I do really, really like Castellanos.
I got Max Schrock popping a lot as a potential cash type option. Well, maybe not cash option because he's 4%.
Yeah, you don't need him in cash. I don't think.
Yeah. But that kind of value bat hitting second, just 2,300. I'm basically just interested in guys like that always when it comes to baseball. So
completely agree.
Big fan of Cincinnati here. Not so much of a fan against the Nats. Do you want to go to Washington against Sonny Gray?
I'll go to Juan Soto, but I don't see much else.
Yeah, that works for me too. I'm good on Reds and Nats. Play the Reds, baby.
Yeah, Castellanos home run.
And Sign up at Awesemo using the promo code MLB Deeper Dive. Get an Awesemo Plus weekly pass for $29.95. You get access to everything we've got: projections, ownership, premium slack, lineup builder, top stacks, top pitchers, top whatever sport that is, top fighters, top golfers. All this stuff exists. You get access to everything using the promo code MLB Deeper Dive. Again, that's one big word, and you get 25% off that first week of Awesemo Plus. We're moving along pretty good here. On to Cubs and Cardinals. This one should be pretty easy. Zach Davies and Jack Flaherty. Davies, 6,500, unowned. Jack Flaherty, 10,200, also unowned. I'm interested in Jack Flaherty. I need you to talk to me about this one. Is there a reason that he shouldn't be getting ownership? Obviously, 10,200 is expensive.
Yeah, I mean, he's expensive, and I'm guessing going to throw like 75 pitches. Or 70 pitches. So that would be the issue. He hasn't pitched since August 24th. He made 3 starts in August. Prior to that, he hadn't pitched since the end of May. So it's just, I don't expect him to go deep enough into this game.
That's fine. I didn't realize he'd been out. My bad. I do have one thing that I want to look at here. It was really odd to me. So this is a 7-inning game, correct?
Yep. With the wind blowing out 20 miles an hour.
Okay, that's the answer then. I was shocked to see the run total on this. And I was just like, are the books wrong and not like adjusting it? Because the total is 9, pretty heavy juice to the under. But normally in these 7-inning games, you see it getting cut down to like the 8, 7.5 range. So when I first started entering it in, I was just like, oh, this is going to be kind of tricky. Even with that run total, can you go to one of these offenses in the short game?
I think so, because they're also priced for a 7-inning game, which is weird. I don't think we've really seen that this year, but we don't have a Cardinals lineup yet, but
the Cubs are free.
What'd you say?
The Cubs are free.
Yeah. The Cubs are free. You have, I mean, not that he's any good, but Nick Martini's hitting 5th at 2K flat. Ortega's at 2,500. The most expensive guy in the Cubs lineup is Patrick Wisdom at 3,100. We don't have the Cardinals lineup yet, but in their projected lineup, the most expensive hitters there are it's Tommy Edman at 3,500, followed by O'Neill and Arenado at 3,400, Goldschmidt at 3,300, everyone else 2,600 or less. So they're really, really priced down here. I like the Cardinals side because, I'm not looking to get to Flaherty, but he's a good enough pitcher that I'm not really looking to get the Cubs, against, let's call it 4 innings of Flaherty. But on the other side for the Cardinals, you have the wind blowing out at 20 miles an hour. You have a pitcher in Zach Davies that doesn't miss a lot of bats, only has a 17.2% strikeout percentage this year. A lot of the times when we talk about major league pitchers that don't get a lot of strikeouts, they do a pretty good job of limiting power and, inducing weak contact. Not really the case for Davies. He's allowed 1.5 home runs per 9 innings this year, 5.02 xFIP against right-handed hitters, which is, the majority of the St. Louis lineup. He's allowed a 196 expected ISO, 371 expected WOBA. There's a pretty good chance, I think, that Davies just gets lit up in these hitting conditions.
That works for me. I have a couple Cardinals popping, nothing too crazy, but those price tags do look really good. And you're not going to see too many run totals that look like this in a 7-inning game. It's crazy to see Nolan Arenado at 10% ownership in a 7-inning game. Like that's on a 15-game slate.
I wonder. I mean, I didn't go back and look. I wonder when the last time Nolan Arenado was $3,400 on DraftKings was.
Never.
And the line that Clayton Kershaw is the opposing pitcher has to be like minus 1,000.
I mean, it wouldn't shock me if the answer is never.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me
either. We got a minute or two. Let's see if I can do this. Let me find Arenado. Got him. Sort Fantasy Cruncher by price.
Carter Keyboom scratched from the Nats lineup for anybody that was playing Carter Keyboom for some reason.
So Arenado has salaries in FC since 2018. This is the lowest that he's ever been. Yeah. The next closest salary for him was yesterday when he was 4,100. Then you'd have to go back to 2 other options in 2019 against Garrett Cole and Blake Snell, both $4,100 options. So there you go. Not all that cheap. All that often. So if you want to take advantage, today's the day to do it. Anything else here, Cubs or Cardinals?
No, just really like the Cardinals bats.
All right. Buckle up. Here we go. 5.3 run implied total for the Rockies. 6.9 for the Giants, which is nice. Peter Lambert going for Colorado. Alex Wood going for San Francisco. Lambert 4,900. Alex Wood 8,400. Will you be getting to pitching?
No. Lambert expected to be limited to 60 pitches. He's also Peter Lambert facing the Giants. Alex Wood, I think there's better pitching options here than going to him in Coors.
The Giants are unquestionably the number one offense today. There's no other choice, as far as I'm concerned, that you could have. How are you managing the Giants? What are your thoughts on the ownership? What do you want to do with San Francisco?
Yeah, it's really tough because on the one hand, they're getting a lot of ownership. It's a 15-game slate. We have them, like you said, the clear number one offense, but they're still not going to be the top offense like 80% of the time. So there's always a case to be made for just, avoiding that. But at the same time, they have a 7.5 implied run total here. They're not facing a good pitcher in Lambert. This isn't even the same as, the Dodgers going up against Marquez and Freeland and Senzatella. Those are, at least guys that have some success. There's no real reason to think Lambert's going to have success pitching in Coors Field here. So the Giants just look really good. You also have some value in there. Tommy La Stella is leading off at 3,900 on DraftKings. You have Evan Longoria batting 7th at 3,800. So those guys really offset the relatively expensive Belt, Posey, Bryant, Crawford pieces. Lamont Wade hitting cleanup only 4,600. So not only is it a good spot for the Giants, but the pricing just isn't really right. I mean, I think you could argue that all of these guys should be at least $500 to $1,000 more expensive in this spot. So it's just a situation where, they're really popular, and you're never wrong if you don't roster a hitter at 25 to 30% ownership. It's fine, to get away from them. But at the same time, I think they're getting the ownership they deserve. Like if they were any lower, you would just be playing the Giants in every lineup basically. So the combination of the pricing, the matchup, just everything, I think they look really good. I would still expect to get there. And that's reflected in the top stack tool. We have them getting 21% aggregate ownership, but a 21% chance of being the top stack as well. So not really projected to go over owned. Just, pair them with low owned secondary stacks, use them as mini stacks with low owned full stacks, pivot from Cease to Barrios or something like that. There's plenty of ways on this slate to get a low enough owned lineup. So the ownership is concerning, but at the same time, I think it's fully deserved.
Now, we'll look at the opposite side of this bad boy. We have the Rockies, number 2 in the top stack odds by quite a bit. I don't entirely agree. I have them third. I think Alex Wood is good. There are multiple other teams with north of 5-run implied totals that I think should be getting a little bit more love. Oh, I don't know why I'm saying that we have them third. We don't. I'm reading this totally incorrectly, just assuming Colorado was the second team on here. They're 9th in our top stack tool. I'm higher on Colorado than our current top stack tool. What are you when it comes to Colorado? Because I should just stop talking.
Yeah, I like Colorado here, especially. I mean, the pricing on DraftKings is just wrong. CJ Cron is $3,400 facing a left-handed pitcher in Coors Field. Wood is fine, but it's not like he's an elite pitcher or anything like that. He's just a pretty good major league pitcher, but he's pitching in Coors. CJ Cron, I read off his splits on the show with Greg this morning, pulling them back up now though. In Coors Field this year, I lost the page. In Coors Field, he has a 460 WOBA, if I remember correctly. 456 WOBA at home this year. 349 ISO. He's only struck out 17.8% of the time. And that's, against lefties and righties. Against lefties overall this year, a 413 WOBA. That's not just in Coors, that's overall. And a 283 ISO. So you're getting the best of both worlds there for Cron. Only 3,400, I think pretty clearly, if not the top first base play, one of the top first base plays. Trevor Story's only 4,300. So that's, another very good value. We don't have Garrett Hampson in the lineup. That was someone that looked like he was going to be one of the better point per dollar values at 2,700. He's not in the lineup, but still, Brendan Rodgers, Trevor Story, CJ Cron in particular, I think really stand out.
I'm really surprised that we don't have them higher in the top value odds.
Yeah, that surprised me.
Cubs and Cardinals are slipping through the cracks or pushing themselves up, I guess, a little bit more. I was expecting to see Colorado have a much higher chance to be the top value because it's not every day that you get 2 guys in the 2Ks in Coors, 4 more guys in the 3Ks. The most Trevor Story at 4,300 in Coors, even against Alex Wood, who's good, against a lefty, that is a preposterous price tag for Trevor Story. It's super wrong.
Yeah, it's insane.
So happy to get to some Rockies as well. Honestly, surprised they're not pulling more ownership, but we'll see where that ends up as we get further along in the slate. Do you have anything else you want to do for Rockies and Giants?
Nope. Just like the hitters.
Yeah. Hell of a stance to take there. What's this Top Shot email? Confirmed packs drop in a half hour. WNBA packs in a half hour.
Okay.
It just popped up. Might as well. I would have really enjoyed getting one of those time art pieces yesterday. That would have been a good time. Anyway, Twins, 4-run implied total. Blue Jays, 4.8. Bailey Ober and Jose Barrios. Neither guy getting any ownership. Barrios is at 4%. I'd be happy to get a little bit more than that, but nothing too crazy. There's a couple good spots for strikeouts in the Minnesota lineup, but ultimately probably not getting to pitching here.
Barrios is one of my favorite GPP pitchers on DraftKings.
Okay. I do have him doubled up on the ownership, but it's nothing too crazy. When he's at 4 and I get to 9, like it's not a ringing endorsement.
Yeah, we have him with the 4th highest top 2 pitcher percentage on the slate. He's getting 4% ownership. I think Cease, Cease projects better, but I think the range of outcomes is pretty similar. You also have Barrios in a situation where the Blue Jays need to win. Again, the White Sox, assuming LaRusse is sober, probably not going to push Cease too far into that game. But it's just, I think the gap is too wide. We basically have, we have Cease with a 23% chance of being a top 2 pitcher. We have Barrios at 15%, but Cease getting 8 times the ownership just doesn't make a ton of sense. I think the matchups are pretty similar. Minnesota, basically a league average offense in terms of production and strikeout percentage. You do have Arias leading off, which is a near, someone that's nearly impossible to strike out. Simmons batting 9th, also really tough to strike out. But there are some strikeouts, mixed in throughout the rest of the lineup. Buxton, Sano in particular, Rooker and Jeffers will strike out as well. Also only supposed to be about 60 degrees in Minnesota. So this should play like a pretty favorable pitcher spark. So I'm with you as far as, I'm not advocating for just like playing 40% Barrios or something like that. But I think that when you look at the pitching on the slate, he really stands out as someone that I would like, if I'm going to the Giants or going to the Rockies or something like that, where I am trying to save some ownership on pitching. I think Barrios really stands out as being on their own here.
I agree that he's underowned. I like him in GPPs. Wouldn't have a ton, but I do like getting over that 4% number. That's for sure.
I will say that I've seen several people just as the day has gone on, just being on Twitter and stuff. I've seen Barrios' name come up as an underowned pitcher several times. So also wouldn't be shocked if this ends up being a 10 or 11% on Barrios as opposed to 4.
That's fine. I'm surprised you were on Twitter and rarely there. No Bailey Ober, right?
No Bailey Ober.
Okay. I have the Blue Jays 9th overall. They are costly in some spots, ultra cheap in others. How are you handling Toronto?
I like them because they're not getting much ownership right now. We have them with a 4%, aggregate ownership percentage. Individually, the highest owned hitter is George Springer at 10%. Then it's Hernandez at 7%. After that, we don't have anybody projected above Marcus Semion's 3%. So anytime you can get to the Blue Jays at that level of ownership, I think it's appealing. The issue is, one that I had said in favor of Barrios, it's pretty chilly in Minnesota today. I'm not expecting the ball to carry. I'm expecting it to play favorably for pitchers. Also, Ober has been pretty good against right-handed hitters this year, 27% strikeout percentage. He has a lot of 196 expected ISO, but only a 307 expected WOBA. So I think if you're going to the Blue Jays, you're just going to them based on the fact that they're not really getting ownership and they have a ton of really, really good hitters with a lot of power. I don't think it's a spot where you're looking at it and saying, I think they're super likely to have success. It's just that they are really, really good offensively and not getting ownership.
Barrios up to 9% now in our ownership, but we have an update. So spot on as far as I'm concerned. Twins bats against him. There's certainly power.
I don't really see it on this particular slate. He's not getting enough ownership for it to drive me to the Twins. There's just, better. There's, I think, so many better alternatives. Like you look at somebody like Byron Buxton at 4,800, he's fine, but you have, all the outfielders on the Giants. You have Tyler O'Neill, you have Harper on the slate, you have Soto, there's just so many alternatives. And, really the same can be said for, I think, most positions. So I think Barrios is a good enough pitcher, and I don't expect the hitting conditions to be very favorable here. So I'm not really interested in the Twins.
Yeah, we're pretty much in the same boat here. I don't have anything else for Twins and Blue Jays.
No, me neither.
Brewers and Mets, 4.3 run implied total for the Brewers, 3.7 for the Mets. Eric Lauer and Tyler McGill. A little bit of ownership coming to both sides. These guys are basically the same price. Lauer at 10% ownership, McGill at 6. I think they're probably both around like 5%ers for me. I'm not interested all that much, but they look okay. They're part of the player pool that you can roster as far as pitchers go. What do you like about or dislike about Lauer or McGill?
Yeah, I think I'm a little bit more interested in McGill than I am Lauer.
Okay.
I don't love the matchup against Minnesota, or against Milwaukee rather. They are running a pretty solid lineup out there. The game's in Miller Park, but McGill does have a 26.6% strikeout percentage this season. It's only behind Cole, Bieber, Cease, and Gray. It's tied with Gonsolin, 3.82 xFIP. So he's just a pitcher where I see him at a similar price to Dylan Cease. And I just think he's another guy that you can use to kind of save some ownership if you need to. Cease twice as likely to be a top 2 pitcher, but getting 5 times the ownership on DraftKings right now. So he's another, Barrios type pivot where I'm not super confident he has a good game. I don't love the matchup or anything, but I think that he has good enough strikeout stuff that he's going to beat the very popular Cease often enough to be worth the ownership. On the other side, Lauer, I think, is an okay pitcher, but not as much strikeout stuff, only a 22.8% strikeout percentage, 4.27 xFIP. I just think he should be like $1,000 less. So it's harder for me to get there, even though I do think the matchup's a little bit better against the Mets.
How are you feeling about some of these bats? I've got the Mets pretty significantly under-owned. Brewers are in the middle of the pack for me. Mets are in the middle of the pack for me, but they're not pulling any ownership. Do you like going to either side for bats?
I don't mind a couple of guys individually. Peter Alonso at only 4,300, I think makes some sense. Lauer's not a gas can or anything like that. He's held righties to a 304 expected WOBA this year, 173 expected ISO, but 4,300 for Peter Alonso is still just a lot of upside there. On the other side, McGill has had some issues with left-handed bats. He's allowed a 342 expected WOBA, 252 expected ISO. And so, looking to, there's several left-handed bats in this lineup. Wong, Yelich, Narvaez, Escobar, Vogelbach, all hitting left-handed. Looking to any of those guys, I think makes some sense. Escobar at 4,200 probably would be my favorite, which is really weird to say considering Yelich is only 3,900. But the Brewers are relatively inexpensive. McGill has had some issues with lefties. So from a full stack standpoint, I'm more interested in the Brewers. Individually from the Mets, I do like Alonso.
Alrighty.
Someone had asked in chat earlier, Crone or Alonso. I would take Crone.
Okay. Speaking of chat, 480 people in here, just 82 likes. That's not going to be enough. Hit that thumbs up. It helps us out a ton. Make sure you're subscribing to the channel and hitting the notification bell on this channel so you never miss our content. Now is the time to give the shout out to the presenting sponsor of this show. That would be Jock Market. And they've turned fantasy sports into a stock exchange. You don't have to wait till the end of the games in order to make some money. You could sell off those shares immediately. Whether it's NBA, MLB, NHL, or PGA, you can make real money the entire time. You pick up shares in the pregame IPO phase. You can buy, sell, or hold. You can short some players now as well. This is my example every time, and I think it holds true. If you buy some shares of a leadoff hitter and he goes yard in his first plate appearance, you can sell those shares immediately, lock in some profit, or wait it out. Try to get a little bit more. Maybe he goes yard again, something along those lines. Use the promo code Awesemo when signing up. Just head to an app store, download the app, use the promo code Awesemo when you sign up and get up to a $50 bonus on your first deposit. This offer is exclusive to the Awesemo community, so make sure you're taking advantage now. Don't leave any of that money on the table. 4 more to go. Let's close this bad boy out. Angels and Mariners, 4-run implied total for the Angels, 4.5 for the Mariners. Jose Suarez and Logan Gilbert. Suarez getting a little bit of ownership, 8% at 6,300. Or you can go to Logan Gilbert at 6,400, who is 36% owned. And I 100% agree with it. It matches my Sims. How do you feel about Logan Gilbert?
I think he's the number one pitching option on DraftKings. On FanDuel, he's fine at 8,200, but we have him projected for 36% ownership. That's just ahead of Cease at 34%. And we talked about Cease. Like I agree he's the best pitching option and all of that, but he's not really discounted to the but like Gilbert is. You can certainly argue that Cease is the better pitcher. He's strikeout percentage is 5 points higher than Gilbert's. Gilbert has a 406 xFIP compared to 3.81 for Cease, but He's also $2,600 less. He's facing an Angels team that has a 25% strikeout percentage since the trade deadline, only a 79 WRC plus. Ohtani's been struggling, but still a very good hitter. But outside of that, outside of Ohtani and Walsh, really, there's not a whole lot in this lineup you're concerned about. And any concern you possibly could come up with about Logan Gilbert, I think, is simply addressed by pointing to the fact he is $6,400.
Yeah, if you are playing cash today and you don't have Logan Gilbert, please send those head-to-heads my way. No brainer play today. He could be 8,400 and he'd still be owned. Like it's
he's a good play on FanDuel.
He's the third highest projected pitcher today, behind Cease and Cole, and not behind Cole by very much. Like, you don't have a choice to play him at 6,400. It's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
What about Suarez though at 6,300?
I think Suarez is a viable tournament pivot away from Gilbert because, Gilbert is, in my opinion, the top play. And I have no issues whatsoever with his ownership. There's still just going to be some lineups where, you have the Giants, you have popular hitters, and you don't really want to add in a nearly 40% on Logan Gilbert, even though you think it's likely he has a good game. In lineups like that, I think Suarez is reasonable, pulling basically 1/4 of the ownership at the same price point. Not the same strikeout stuff at all. 20% strikeout percentage for Suarez compared to 26.3% for Gilbert, 4.44 xFIP. But, he's good. He's good enough that if I need to save some ownership, I think that's fine. Apparently,
Logan Gilbert being a no-brainer play requires me to give someone a break. Just because it's baseball doesn't make it not true.
Yeah, you didn't. I think they're confusing no-brainer with lock.
Yeah,
and in cash he is a lock, to be clear. But
yeah. Like he's a clear lock in cash. It's not close. It's not up for debate. You can't come to a different conclusion. I mean, you can.
Okay, so
you don't
he just
win money.
So he said Hernandez is 10% owned compared to Gilbert at 36. That's fine. Gilbert's strikeout percentage is 10 points higher than Hernandez's. Gilbert's walk percentage is half of Hernandez's. His xFIP is a run and a half lower almost. I would say that Gilbert being more popular than Hernandez makes a lot of sense.
Garrett Cole is 10,800 today. We have him projected 3/4 of a fantasy point ahead of Logan Gilbert at 6,400. Like, just use that as perspective. Doesn't get any easier than that. I mean, this is honestly like one of the more ridiculous salaries on a pitcher this season.
Yeah, I don't remember a more ridiculous salary since Aaron Nola was 8,500 against the Pirates yesterday.
Also true. Different style of ridiculous.
Yeah.
Because Logan Gilbert will still unlock you anyone. Like, when you're getting into the eights, you're adding a couple extra thousand in salary. I mean, Logan Gilbert fits in any build you want, no matter who you pick. Bats, Mariners, fine. Angels, no. Do you want offense here?
The Mariners are kind of interesting. We have them as one of the more under-owned stacks, basically pulling 1% ownership with almost a 4% chance of being the top stack. It's not a spot that I love. I don't love the pricing on the Mariners either, but they do stand out a little bit. I think Haniger is a good play. He should be low owned because there's certainly better options. But a Haniger, Seager, France stack, mixing in two of the other guys, I think is fine. Not a huge priority, but they are projected to be a bit underowned.
All right, let's move it on to Diamondbacks and Dodgers. 4.1 run implied total for the D-backs, 5.9 for the Dodgers. Humberto Castellanos and Tony Gonsolin. Neither guy getting any ownership. Neither guy should.
Agreed. It's a good spot for Gonsolin. He's a pretty decent pitcher, but just nothing really to suggest he's going deep enough into this game for me to really want to roster him. Through 37 pitches last time out, 67, 55 in his previous two appearances. So assuming he's going to throw around 70 pitches here, just pretty tough for me to get there, even though it is a good spot against Arizona. Certainly not looking at Humberto Castellanos against the Dodgers. I think pretty easy to just ignore that one.
Number 2 in the top stack tool for me and for the site. I have no problem getting to any amount of Dodgers today.
No, me neither. We don't have a huge sample for Castellanos in the majors. He has been pretty good at limiting right-handed bats so far, but you also have to keep in mind those numbers aren't derived from facing Mookie Betts and Trey Turner and Will Smith and Justin Turner. It's so clearly above average hitters here. He's had issues with lefties, 373 expected WOBA, 251 expected ISO. Sets up really nicely for Seager. I think he's one of the best shortstop options. Muncy's certainly a good play as well. So I like the Dodgers. I do think that at their respective ownership levels, I would prefer the Giants to the Dodgers, even though they're getting more ownership. But a good spot for the Dodgers for sure.
Do you have any interest in the Diamondbacks against Gonsolin?
No, I don't. I think Gonsolin's just a good enough pitcher. Calhoun at 2,600 is fine, but Varsho's priced up. Kettle Marte is expensive and not stealing bases anymore. I actually saw an interesting tweet earlier. He has an identical sprint speed this season to Vladimir Guerrero. Yeah, hamstring injuries over the last couple of years.
Yeah. Wow. That's not the name that I was expecting you to say.
Yeah.
Moving it on to Oakland and Houston. At A's 4.1 run implied total, 3.9 for the Stros. Frankie Montas and Brandon Bielak. No ownership coming in here because Montas is 10,600, which isn't too crazy, but it is against the Astros. So I don't have a ton of interest in pitching. No,
neither do I. Fried, I think, is good enough where you can kind of throw him into that Jose Barrios group as well. Fried pulling about 9% ownership compared to 34% for Cease. He probably outscores Cease often enough to be a viable pivot if you have popular bats. But again, Cease, projects better. He's the guy that I would get to if ownership isn't an issue. Not a great matchup against the Padres. We don't have the lineup yet. Greg guessed this morning that Tatis sits here. Certainly a reasonable guess, and so pay attention to the Padres lineup. Maybe it ends up being a bit weaker than it typically would be. And that would be interesting for Fried because he is a good pitcher. 24% strikeout percentage, 3.5 xFIP. Not quite the same strikeout upside as guys like Cease and Barrios, but in a one-game sample certainly can come out ahead of those guys.
I don't think that I'm going to be getting to offense here, even though I do like both offenses. Seems like a tough spot in Oakland.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I was on the Padres game. I was just talking about Max Fried. But it's all right. So not on the pitching here. Montas, just a really tough matchup. He's expensive. Bielak, not likely to go deep enough. Not going to the Astros bats. And I'm with you. Just a tough spot here. Tough park to hit in, only 60 degrees. Don't really have much interest in Oakland. And I've also covered the pitching in the Padres game.
You're incredible.
Well, the list that I'm looking at has the Diamondbacks after the A's game. So I just moved down the list and got to the Padres.
You realize I introed this game, right?
You realize I wasn't listening, right?
I think every single person on the show realizes that you were not listening. So are we in agreement here? No Oakland, no Houston bats.
Yeah, pretty much. Both teams are good enough offenses where if you're watching the show and you're just oh, I want to take a chance on Houston, it's not like you're wrong or something like that. You're never really wrong going to the A's or the Astros at very low ownership. But there's enough other low-owned teams today that I prefer that I wouldn't expect to get to them.
All right, let's close it out with a team we've already touched on. San Diego Padres, Atlanta Braves, Reese Kinnear, Max Fried. I was desperately waiting for you to be by the way, it's near. I wanted it so bad.
You know what? That's actually why I didn't hear you intro the game, because that's what I was doing is I couldn't remember how to pronounce it. So I was trying to find that pronunciation guide again and just completely missed what you were talking about.
You could have just waited until I had to say it the first time instead of saying it first for no reason whatsoever. Fried at 9%. I didn't listen to your Fried takes, obviously. So talk to me about Max Fried, or at least sum up whatever the hell you said when we were talking about a different game.
Yes, I love that you didn't stop me the entire time. But yeah, basically,
I don't care about your analysis. I have to go prep the next thing that I have to talk about.
Yeah, the gist of it was that I don't love Fried here, but I think he's very similar to Barrios in that if you need to save ownership, he's going to outscore Dylan Cease often enough that it's a viable play. So if ownership doesn't matter, play Cease. If it does matter, Fried is fine. Do pay attention to the Padres lineup. Greg guessed this morning Tatis doesn't play today after Machado sat yesterday. We could see, a watered down lineup that makes things better for Fried.
How are you feeling about the Braves bats in this one?
I don't know. I haven't talked about them yet. Kind of neutral on them. I don't really like the park. I don't love what I expect to more or less be a bullpen game for For the Padres. Kinnear he threw 23 pitches. He hasn't pitched in a month, but in the majors in a month, but was used as a reliever before. So I'm not expecting him to go like super deep into this game or anything. So it's not a crazy appealing spot to me. I do think that the Braves are another one of those teams, where they're not getting much ownership. They are really good. I don't have any issues getting to them. Individually, Soler stands out at 3,700, but not a huge priority for me either. Obviously, would be looking to teams like the Giants, the Dodgers, the Rockies, the Cardinals ahead of them.
Pack drop in 2 minutes.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, Padres not popping at all. The only one that is Tatis, and I don't know if he's going to be in that lineup. So I don't have anything else for San Diego.
No, me neither.
Sum it up. Favorite stacks?
Giants, but pay attention to the ownership of the rest of your lineup. Cardinals, Dodgers, Phillies.
Okay. Reds and Rangers are the two that I am liking a little bit more than our current ownership. Favorite pitchers?
Gilbert, Cease, Gray. In tournaments, I like Barrios and Fried as pivots away from Cease.
Gilbert, Cole, Gibson, and Hernandez are my favorite four guys, just in combination of likelihood and ownership. But that is it. Adam, anything else for this slate?
Nope.
We are done, everybody. Don't go anywhere. Stay here, hit the like button, but stick around. MLB Live Before Lock coming up next. Enjoy your weekend, everybody. Good luck tonight. We'll talk to you again later.
It is the Awesemo MLB Live Before Lock, sponsored by Jock Market. I'm here with Terry. We're going to have a little conversation. We're going to listen to each other. We're going to respond to each other, say, and have a conversation like a normal human beings do. Not like that deep dive where they come out and they just talk at each other and don't listen to each other. Terry and I, we're actually friends. We like talking to each other. Terry, what's going on, man?
Yeah, it's actually like enjoyable to have conversations and, kick these ideas around and just, crack some jokes while we go and have a fun time. So yeah, I'm with you, man. I laughed at your first comment on the air here, so I couldn't pull off the what'd you say joke like I did behind the scenes, the cheesy dad joke that I did. But yeah, having a good day, man. It's like to be here with you. Wall-to-wall DFS for me today. I created a fantasy cruncher video for NFL that everybody can check out, kind of a tutorial video that's up as of like 4:30. Did a big deep dive for like an hour into all the different settings and functions on Fantasy Cruncher for football. And then it's been all baseball ever since. Got my football groups article up. Wall-to-wall DFS. How you doing?
The video, is that just posted on our YouTube channel right now?
It is. It's posted on our regular Awesemo YouTube channel, and it'll be linked in my groups article as well. And we'll probably create a separate little post for it on the site. It'll be up in our help center. We're going to make that thing easy to find.
Yeah. All right. So by the way, guys, just go when you're making football lineups, there's a couple things you want to do then. You want to be checking out Terry's article in terms of seeing how you use Fantasy Cruncher to build those lineups. And you look at his groups article, see which players you're actually going to be putting in those lineups. Find all that by going over to awesemo.com. Terry's article is free every week. And then we've also got our YouTube channel. Obviously, that is free as well. Like this video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. And it won't be that hard to find the stuff that Terry puts out there. Terry doing deep dives for football, baseball, a little bit of everything. But now time to dive into tonight's baseball slate and starting with the pitchers. And, I did a strategy show this morning with Adam, and in general, not all that much has changed in terms of ownership. So let's just start at the top of the pricing algorithm. We've got Garrett Cole on FanDuel and DraftKings as an expensive pay-up option. $11K on FanDuel, only projected for 3.8% ownership. On DK, $10,800. He's projected for 12.9% ownership. It's clearly a risky spot for Garrett Cole. He's on the mound in Boston, not an ideal matchup. He was awful his last time out against Cleveland. But are you looking at Garrett Cole as a viable contrarian option today?
Absolutely. I think it's definitely a go-to spot for Garrett Cole. He's pricier than I'd like him to be in this spot, relative to some of the other, quote unquote, maybe safer options. But I think he's still, even against this excellent Red Sox lineup, he's got the biggest chance at giving us just a runoff and hide kind of a score. The Red Sox have been spectacular all year long against right-handed pitching. 210 ISO, 22.5% strikeout rate, a 4.59% home run rate, create runs 12% better than average against righties. But Garrett Cole is the apex righty in baseball right now. I mean, he has had a fantastic season. This is the start that they have him on the team for, right? Late September starts in a tight race against the Red Sox with the Blue Jays chasing both of them. The wild card race stacks up. The Red Sox are 2 games up on the Yankees. The Yankees are a game up on the Blue Jays. So these are critical, crucial starts. This is what Garrett Cole is here for. 169 and a third this year, 34.2% strikeout rate, 5.6% walks, 2.87 xFIP. There's nothing not to like here. You might get dinged by the occasional power that he yields, but this has actually been his best season for home runs in 3 years since 2018. So he's limited the home runs a little bit better than normal as well. So I love the upside for Garrett Cole, and anytime you can get him lower owned than he should be, fire away.
Yeah, and that's really the key for me. The matchup, obviously, I don't like it. I don't like that he's on the road in Boston. However, the other thing we also have to consider, I'm going to transition into talking about Dylan Cease from here. Dylan Cease, who's projected for 33.5% ownership on DK. He's a chalk pitcher there. FanDuel, the most popular pitcher on the slate at 20.6% ownership. I think we're at a point in the season where motivation matters to this extent. I'm not saying guys are going to pitch better or worse because they're trying harder. I'm of the belief professional athletes are trying hard regardless of the circumstance. It's their job. And there's not a sport like, okay, I'm pitching harder now that the Yankees are competing for a playoff spot. But this is something that does matter to me when we consider Garrett Cole versus Dylan Cease. The White Sox have nothing to play for. And that doesn't mean I think Dylan Cease is not going to care or try to give up home runs. It really worries me in terms of how deep is he going to be allowed to pitch into games, because we've seen with the White Sox, they've been restrictive with Carlos Rodon in the second half of the season. In the second half of the season, they've been restrictive with Lance Lynn, and we're just at a point of the year where the White Sox, their spot in the playoffs, it's signed, sealed, and delivered. They already know where they're at. So if Dylan Cease only pitches 5 innings or 80 pitches, none of that surprises me. If Garrett Cole is pitching well today due to where the Yankees are in the standings, he might throw a season high in pitches. So Garrett Cole, there's much more motivation for the Yankees to give him extra innings than somebody like Dylan Cease. So while Cease, I think, is an excellent play today, if you're just to look at it and not consider any other information, you're just looking at price tag, you're looking at the matchup, then sure, go ahead and fire up Dylan Cease. But I want to be underweight to the field just because I'm concerned about some of those workloads and how deep he's going to go into the games. So that's why I look at Garrett Cole as a viable pivot option. But how much does stuff like that come into play with you when you're considering Cease today?
Yeah, absolutely. It was one of the first things I thought of with Cease was I was writing about him. And I think he's in a good spot against a team that strikes out a decent amount, doesn't have, outside of a couple guys, a ton of power, a ton of run creation upside. I just started thinking about, all right, they've been really limiting these guys. Let's think in terms of the postseason race. And it's everything that you just said. They've been locked down for a while now. And just looking at his game log, he's got 2 of his last 3 starts have been 5 innings. And then the third one, he only went 2 1/3, but he kind of got lit up by Boston. So to only go 5 innings at Texas, only go 5 innings at Kansas City, while things aren't going badly, he gave up 3 runs on 4 hits in the KC game. He was pitching clean in Texas, 4 hits, 2 walks, 10 strikeouts. So it wasn't the most efficient outing probably in terms of the pitch count. So we'd have to take a look at that. But overall, he faced fewer batters than he had been facing, coming down the stretch here. And I think it's very, very likely that they limit him to 5 innings again. This could be that same 5-inning, 10 strikeout performance, and he could put up a runaway and hide kind of a score. He's probably the next most likely guy on this board to do that. 31.6% strikeout rate over the course of the season. He puts too many guys on base. He gets in a little bit of danger, but he's been pitching well to get out of it. 14.6% induced swinging strike, despite he's got a 9.8% walk rate, 1.26 whip, but he's not been getting into trouble. He's been getting himself out of any trouble he creates this season. So there is the potential that the Indians on the other side, that Cleveland on the other side, can get a couple guys on base via the free pass and crack a 3-run homer that kind of ruins his day, or at least sets him back behind the potential of like a Jose Barrios, let's say, or if Garrett Cole does run off and hide, limit Cease's upside. So with that much weight on him, yeah, I just want to start shifting shares into Garrett Cole, figure out a way to pay the differential. And it's a big difference on FanDuel. It's a little bit, no, it's pretty big on DK as well. It sees the same price across sites. But I think it just makes sense, just given the most likely scenario is that Cease is going to be limited. And the most likely scenario, to your point, is that, yeah, they're going to let Cole fly as long as he doesn't get lit up here. They're going to want him to pitch deep into this game. And that's what I was kind of getting at with the importance of the game to the Yankees. Yeah, that's why he's on this team, and they're going to run him out there. A lot of times we see if a guy comes out and he's just trying too hard to pitch or throw hard, that actually throws guys off. So you don't want that kind of, that idea where, all right, he's going to really try much harder this time. When guys get fired up on the mound a little bit, sometimes it definitely has a detrimental effect. So I'm just talking about what the Yankees are going to do with Garrett Cole, assuming he's having a good start.
Yeah, that's where I'm at as well. Same kind of logic. And once again, I very rarely look at these kind of narratives, but there are specific circumstances where I think it matters. And we've seen with the White Sox kind of have a limited pitchers. By the way, pitch count, Dylan Cease last 2 times out 92 and 71 pitches. So it's not like they have him totally unleashed going out there throwing 100, 110 pitches. It's been a couple weeks since we've really seen that from him. And I don't think we're going to see it again until the playoffs, because we know that's where the White Sox are headed. The Yankees spot in there is still a little bit uncertain. Now, with that said, we did get a question that's pretty interesting here in the YouTube chat from, by the way, we have some super chats here and whatnot to catch up on, but I also want to address while we're on the Cease point. Robert Black in the YouTube chat said, would we still go with Dylan Cease for FanDuel cash? To me, that's still a yes, just based on the ownership there. He's projected to be the most rostered pitcher on FanDuel by, a pretty good clip. The only guy who's really close is Sonny Gray, but Sonny Gray also is picking up, 15% ownership compared to 20. So talking about Dylan Cease potentially 50% owned in cash games. When he's going to be that popular, I just say ride with him in cash games for FanDuel and DraftKings. Would you agree with that, Terry?
Yeah, I don't mind that. I think you can get away probably if you wanted to save $800. It's not enough of a salary difference, though. I was just thinking in terms of playing the value guy who's similarly ranked, a little bit less popular, but you're saving money on him in Logan Gilbert there. You're giving up a decent amount of strikeout potential in making that move, but you do save 800. I'd like it a lot better if he was in the 7,000 kind of range, though. So, yeah, I think Cease is the move for cash. I think that makes sense.
All right, now we can catch up on some of these super chats. We got our guy, G&B Kim, a long time friend of mine and a definite Twitter friend. We DM a decent amount. Are the New York Giants going 0-17 this year? It's a good thing there's only 17 games, or else they'd find a way to lose. They might even go 0-18 in 17 games. I think they're going to set new records. They find very unique ways to lose. So Giants go 0-18 in 17 games this year. That is my prediction. Baldy in the Oaf. Sounds like this is a Aton fan account. Yeah, but he's saying just Terry appreciation post and Baldy in the Oath. We appreciate the super chat. We appreciate you appreciating Terry with the super chat. So very much appreciated there. But let's talk about Logan Gilbert then. And I get the price point is a little bit different on DK, but just because you brought him up for FanDuel right there, and he's still going to be fairly popular today. 10% projected ownership over on FanDuel and very favorable matchup for him in Los Angeles. Number one, Los Angeles' lineup at this point of the year, it's not great. They strike out a ton. And then also some concerns about Shohei Ohtani down the stretch of the season. He's been pretty off for a considerable amount of time now. So that lineup really does not present much resistance. Over on DK, though, I'm finding it hard to know what to do with Logan Gilbert because from a salary saving perspective, he's clearly the top cheap pitching option on the slate. I just don't want to rush him 36.4% of the time in the field is we have Logan Gilbert, 36.4% projected ownership. He does have a 31.1% chance to be a top 2 value pitcher in our projections, 16.8% chance to be a top 2 pitcher overall. I'm a little bit underweight to the field on Logan Gilbert right now. He's certainly in the mix for me, but I'm not going to be getting to, 35, 40% to be overweight to the field. He's more like a 25 to 30% play for me. But what do you make of Logan Gilbert here, Sari?
Yeah, I think I'd be doing that same thing just for me. When we start talking about the lower end, the value plays and things like that, I do like to spread those out, get a little bit further afield. I think it's a very good spot for him. I agree with you. There's not much here anymore in this Angels lineup. So I think it's definitely a spot where he can put up a standout start. Against right-handed pitching for the season, their active roster, 24.9% strikeout rate, one of the worst marks in the league, 3% below average creating runs, just around average in terms of power with a 167 ISO, a 352 home run rate. So I think he's got some safety and he's got some strikeout upside, 26.3% rate over 108 in the third innings on the season. Nothing to sneeze at for a young kid coming up. That's a pretty solid rate. He only walks 5% of hitters, so he keeps himself pretty safe throughout. I don't really worry about him here, and I think there's upside going up against the lineup with that many strikeouts in it. It just becomes that ownership question. He's currently sitting on DK at double the ownership of what his probability of being a top 2 starter is. You mentioned that it's a lot more even with his probability of being a top 2 value, which makes sense given a $6,400 salary. I don't think there's anyone else in that price tier that necessarily compares. I'm somewhat intrigued by Carlos Hernandez against Detroit for $5,500 on the DK slate. He's the only guy below that $6,000 range that I would want to, or below that $7,000 range rather, other than Logan Gilbert that I would want to consider. But he's also getting overowned, not to the same degree and not to the same overall total popularity number. He's around 10% with like a 6% probability of being a top 2. But I think spreading some shares around to him and just getting over the field on him while undercutting slightly on Gilbert just gives you a little bit of diversity in your lineups, gives you a little bit of room to make different plays with the bats. A $900 difference at that level is something interesting to me. I can buy two hitter upgrades with that $900. So depends what you're doing with the salary and where you're moving the shares to. But I don't see other really comparable value plays.
And by the way, some numbers recently for Shohei Ohtani. In August, he did 98 WRC plus and a 30.2% strikeout rate. In September, 94 WRC plus, 27.8% strikeout rate. I still believe, obviously, I still think Shohei Ohtani is terrific, but I do wonder if pitchers are kind of starting to figure him out a little bit, and they've adjusted to what he's been doing this year. Something to keep an eye on going forward for sure and into next year. One more super chat here from Nick Engel. He's saying, one lineup build on FanDuel. Who would you use as your main 4-man stack and pitcher? So Terry, who is your favorite FanDuel pitcher today for tournaments? It's Garrett Cole for me. And then what is your favorite GPP stack?
So, Garrett Cole is my favorite tournament pitcher on FanDuel. I think it makes all the sense in the world to pay up for him. Like we talked about, anytime you can get Garrett Cole at positive leverage, it's worth doing even against these Red Sox. I mean, there's a very obvious stack on the board with San Francisco playing out in Colorado, one of the best offenses in baseball, playing at Coors Field. Kind of makes some sense. You do still have them at slightly positive leverage, but they're going to be really, really popular. I wrote up the Yankees today. They have a little bit of positive leverage on the FanDuel slate. If you can figure out ways to pair them with Cole, and you got to get really creative with your value plays if you want to go to the best Yankees bats. But I think that plays well. I think the Blue Jays look great today. They're also positively leveraged. A lot of the obvious teams at the top of the FanDuel board, though, talking about like the Dodgers, the Rays, the Phillies to a degree, the Rockies are all negatively leveraged. So I would just kind of, if you're not interested in any of the teams I just rattled off, I would start scrolling through that board and poking around at some of those positively leveraged teams in the middle. And you can get to like the Astros in that range. The Mariners are somewhat interesting. The Royals might be a little interesting. So there's a lot to work with. It's a very even kind of a plateau of a board there.
Yeah, and by the way, the top stacks tool, that is free to use today if you guys want to go over there and check out some of the stacks where we have them projected in terms of odds to be a top stack compared to the ownership. I still tend to say San Francisco. I think that if you're going with Garrett Cole at pitcher, I just become less concerned with the ownership on San Francisco when you consider Cole's only projected for 3% ownership himself. Cole's a mini contrarian. That kind of means, doesn't really matter that much for playing a chalky offense. The lineup's already going to be different with Cole there. Salary becomes a little bit of an issue here because the Giants are, pretty expensive playing in Coors Field. But I think this is where you go. It's a big 15-game slate. There's a lot of value bats to be found. So I would go Garrett Cole, 4-man Giant stack for single entry, and then try to find 4 value plays you like over on FanDuel. And I think that's a fine way to start a GPP lineup, in my opinion. All right, so let's talk about some of these other pitchers now. And any of these other pay-up options really stand out to you as potential pivots off of Dylan Cease, Garrett Cole? We've got Jose Barrios on the slate. We've got Shane Bieber, Frankie Montas. We'll go with this price range, and then we'll talk about Sonny Gray afterwards. But right now, in particular, I want to get your thoughts on it. By the way, we could throw in Nathan Eovaldi and Max Fried in there as well. So anybody who's priced, let's say, 9K and above across FanDuel DK that we haven't talked about, any of those names stand out to you?
So, I mean, to take one off the top, Shane Bieber, the most expensive guy on the slate at 11.3, is not in my player pool. He is going to be limited to 50 to 55 pitches this evening and 3 innings max. So it's the first of 3 innings or 50 to 55 pitches, according to their pitching coach. I have no interest in Shane Bieber for that length at that price. I don't think, though, that it plays well for the White Sox, just to continue through that game real quick, just because the White Sox are now going to be facing one of the best pitchers in baseball for the first 3 innings of this game. And then they go into what is at worst a league average Cleveland bullpen. They're above average in terms of xFIP. They're a top 9, I think it was, team in terms of relief pitcher xFIP. And they were exactly in the middle of the league in both strikeout rate and walk rate. So they're not a bad bullpen. So I just don't see it for the White Sox, but I want no part of Shane Bieber on this slate. I think out of the names you rattled off there, the guys in that price range, Jose Barrios, certainly very interesting against Minnesota there. He's a pitcher. I wrote him up in the tournament strategy article this afternoon. And as you can tell, I am stalling for time trying to get them to pop up here. There he is. And 25.5% strikeout rate over 30 starts, 180 innings for Barrios this season, 3.68 xFIP. He's been a little bit clunky with the contact, but it hasn't really cost him because he doesn't put a ton of guys on base. 5.9% walks, 1.07 whip, 9.2% barrels, 38.9% hard hit. You're throwing that into a Twins team that has a reputation for a lot of power, but I'm not that worried about a pitcher like Barrios going back up against his former mates here. They are a team, they're 185 ISO, exactly at league average by WRC plus creating runs. They do have a 4.18% home run rate, so they're a little above average for power, but there's 23.1% strikeouts there. I think there's enough there for him to pitch through clean and for him to grab some strikeouts. And for the ownership that he's drawing, I think he's an extreme popularity discount. Under 10% on DK and under 2% on as of my last update on FanDuel. That is an under-owned situation for Barrios against this team. So I like the upside for him, and there's a lot of strikeouts packed into this confirmed lineup.
Yeah, and by the way, just because it was asked in the YouTube chat, I believe the MLB Top Stacks is free today. I have the FanDuel tab open. It says free on the page, and I was sent that in the marketing notes. If that is not the case, then I guess I'm confused. But I believe it is. I believe it's free today, and I'll throw the link into chat just so it's there. But okay, well, Jonathan Adams is saying that it doesn't let him do it. So I don't know what the free content is today. It says, are you on the Top Stacks tool? It says free to me on the screen. Does it say free to you as well?
Pitchers stacks.
Top stack percentage FanDuel says free today.
I'm not seeing where you're seeing free. There in the headline. How about that?
Yeah,
but the DK one doesn't say that. So I think we might have that might have been a slip by the editing folks. If anybody in the editing crew is listening to us talk right now, go in there and open that up for the people, since we promised it. We've only got 40 minutes till lock. We're not giving anything too crazy away.
Okay,
let the people see it.
By the way, now I also like now everybody in chat is telling me what's actually free today. I only know what's in the notes. I don't know what's on the screen, what's in the notes they've sent to me. But in our daily marketing plan, it did say the MLB Top Stacks was free. But Ownership apparently ownership is also free today, but I'll be giving out all the top stack percentages as we go and we get into the offenses later because now I feel a little bad about that. But yeah, everybody in chat is correcting me now. And oh my God, Tyler, you're producing job, but somebody is going to replace you. I've got like a million people in the chat give me the correct information here.
Well, that just tells me that our other guys have done such a great job promoting all these free tools and all this free content throughout the day on all these shows that everybody knows. That's great. Well done, everybody.
And good point also in the YouTube chat is that Baldy Nova saying that Sean V's advice always free. No matter what, you're watching the show, you always get free advice from Sean V, and that's something that should never be discounted. There's no price you can put on Sean V's YouTube takes. But all right, other pitching options here. Moving down the board in terms of value, are there any cheap pitchers that really stand out to you as somebody that you'd be looking to get to a decent clip today?
So let's see, just taking a peek back at the DK pricing, a guy that you mentioned that's only on the DK slate, actually, he's not in that cheap category, but I do think Max Fried is somewhat interesting given somewhat level ownership at just a flat 8% and not really kind of a standout one way or the other. I don't think as much of that Padres lineup lately as maybe we've thought throughout the year. And I do think a lot of Max Fried as a pitcher. So I think he's interesting, but that doesn't really tackle your question. From that next pricing tier, I do think Kyle Gibson going up against the Pittsburgh Pirates. I don't think very much of Kyle Gibson at all over time as a pitcher. I know there have been points at which, various people have dabbled with him. I've never won with him in the past, but I think throwing basically anybody, you or me included, up against this Pittsburgh Pirates team most of the time is a good idea. I know that hasn't necessarily worked out well the last couple of days with some of these Phillies pitchers, but I'm willing to go back to the well with the worst one of the Phillies pitchers. 19.9% strikeout rate for Gibson over 171 and 2/3, 4.14 xFIP and 8.5% walk rate. So he walks too many guys. He doesn't strike anybody out. Gives up just a 4% barrel rate, 38.2% hard hit, 7-degree average launch angle. So somewhat difficult to hit home runs in. But what we're attacking with him is just the awful Pittsburgh lineup. Their 131 team ISO, their 2.58% home run rate, and their 18% worse than average creating runs against right-handed pitching. Plus they have a 23.4% strikeout rate. It just makes sense to throw pitchers at them. And not a lot of the field is going to be here. 7,900 on DK, 21-ish% ownership. I feel like he should maybe be pulling a little bit more popularity than that. 8,600 on FanDuel, probably owned a little bit more than he should be at 14.2%.
Yeah, and then also, by the way, while we're on the topic of Sean V and whatnot off of that, if you guys, because we were running a little poll on Twitter yesterday, something in the chat, we were throwing around the idea of replacing Eric on the YouTube channel with Sean V. And here's how you guys could go ahead and vote for that. If you would like to see Eric replaced by Sean V on our baseball shows, like this video. If you would like to see Eric remain on the shows instead of Sean V, also like this video. Votes will be tallied at the end of the day, and then we can determine what course of action that we're going to be taking. Also, while you're liking the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. And the heat is on. Eric's job is in jeopardy because Sean V has been on fire in the YouTube chat. And by the way, now Sean V coming in, he's saying the MLB ownership isn't free either. But listen, I've had the amazing marketing man, Joey Corman, who is, he said that the ownership is free today. But he also said that he's going to make the top stacks. He's going to put that up as free today. So no worries. We're gonna open that up as well. But all right, pitching options. Do we have a lineup yet for the San Diego Padres? I'm trying to see which lineups have come through or haven't come through when we've been on the show.
That one is not in my model today. Doesn't look like it. I just
okay. Yeah. Still no Padres lineup. So the Padres are effectively out of the playoff race at this point. They are a considerable amount of games, but the Cardinals never lose anymore. The last time the Cardinals lost, it was like the Revolutionary War was going on. It's been a minute. The Cardinals have gone from out of the playoff picture to now cemented into the second wild card spot. As a result, the Padres kind of seemed to wave the white flag yesterday. Manny Machado was not in the lineup, obviously with a couple weeks to go in the regular season. If the Padres still thought they were live, Manny Machado would be in there. My gut feeling today is that Fernando Tatis gets the night off and we see a pretty weakened Padres lineup. If that is the case, I think Max Fried becomes a pretty appealing pitching option. The Braves still have everything to play for, trying to seal up the NL East. The Padres seemingly waving the white flag. I think we see a lot of games to close out the season where the Padres just throwing a lot of backups in there. So with that in mind, keep an eye on that Padres lineup. I think Max Fried is somebody who could become a low-owned, interesting option should something change there with the Padres lineup. Is that something you've considered at all today with some of these teams falling out of the playoff picture?
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's definitely an interesting spot to do it. I hadn't considered Tatis specifically, and I actually missed that Machado didn't play last night. So that's a great call by you. What I was thinking of just in general is, I respect Max Fried as a pitcher. And I think that this Padres team, look, we don't have to look any further than the fact that they're out of the playoff race, right? They're probably been a little bit overrated when people have thought of them as this elite team all season long. They've really been a team that has two prominent bats in it, and that's Manny Machado and Tatis. So if you get this lineup on any given slate without one of them, and I'm looking through my model, like, why can't I find this? Why can't I find this? I forgot. I just said they're not in my model today, but you do get them, you get a lineup that's somewhat weakened without either one of those guys. If you get an opportunity without both of them, so much the better. But you're throwing them up against a pitcher that's a decent left-hander. For the season, they have a 2.85% home run rate and a 152 ISO in the split against lefties. They only strike out 21.4% of the time, and they create runs 1% better than average. But that's with Machado and Tatis in the lineup. That's the active roster. So you lose one of those guys, you're going to lose a significant portion of that. They're going to fall below average even further. I think it creates an upside spot for Fried. And if people aren't going to him, it makes sense to get there.
Yeah, just still looking on that lineup. Like you said, you don't have it in your data yet. The lineup isn't there. We're waiting on just a handful of lineups right now, but the Padres are one of them. By the way, that's a lineup that might not come out until after lock, since that's a game that has a 10:10 p.m. start time. By far the latest start time on the slate. That's 30 minutes after the next latest game, which is Houston, Oakland. So we're waiting on the Padres lineup, the Braves lineup, the Houston lineup, and the Angels lineup. We have all of the lineups for the earlier game, so something to keep an eye on. But any other pitchers you want to bring up here, Terry? If not, we could look at some of these pitcher strikeout props and then head over to the hitters.
We didn't touch on Sonny Gray, did we?
Did we not talk? Okay. If we didn't talk about Sonny Gray, that is my bad, because Sonny Gray is one of my favorite overall pitching options on the slate. Actually, he is my favorite pitching option on the slate. Favorable price tag, 8,600 on DK. Over on FanDuel, Sonny Gray is at 8,800. And I think he warrants having more ownership than Dylan Cease today. Really favorable matchup at home against the Washington Nationals. They have Josh Bell. They have Juan Soto. Beyond that, nothing I'm really afraid of. He's also at home. The Reds are kind of falling out of the playoff picture, but it's not like they've totally waved the white flag yet. We're still seeing them going for it at this point in time. So I think we're going to see at least one more full start from Sonny Gray. And, maybe if the Reds go on a winning streak to end the season and the Cardinals finally start to slip and lose a game here or there, then I think the Reds are back in the mix. But yeah, Sonny Gray home against the Nationals. That is my fault. I like him quite a bit today.
Yeah, same here. He stood out to me today. I wrote a little bit about him in the tournament strategy article. I wish the ownership was a little bit lower. I was hoping he would sneak through it at a little bit of a less popularity there, but I really like the option at price. I think the prices are too low for his talent, and honestly, for how he's pitched through the season, he's a guy who's got a reputation for, maybe being a bit of a roller coaster, but overall, 27.4% strikeout rate, a 3.59 xFIP, 8.3% walks, 1.18 whip, puts a few too many guys on base. We've seen that. 10.8% strikeout, swinging strike rate though, and a 30.2% CSW. So he's able to get himself out of trouble. And what I really like is the contact profile has been spectacular this year. 4.2% barrel rate, 30.7% hard hit, 86.7 mile an hour average exit velo on a 9.2 degree average launch angle. Sonny's made it very difficult to hit home runs against him. So going up against the Nationals lineup with nothing in it except for Juan Soto, I'm happy to get there. That's I think that spot makes a ton of sense. And you see in the aggregate, you see a low strikeout rate overall for the Nationals as an active roster. A lot of that is either small sample with guys like Keibert Ruiz, who's made 69 plate appearances and has a 13% strikeout rate. And then a massive amount of that is Juan Soto in the middle of that lineup with his 13.7% strikeout rate over 611 plate appearances. That's a ridiculous rate. Soto's 13.7% strikeouts, 21.4% walks over 611 plate appearances this year. That's bananas. He is so good. But avoiding him, you get a very nice start here from Sonny Gray. Yeah,
so I totally agree. Sonny Gray, pitcher I like very, very much on this slate. And by the way, let's mention Logan Gilbert, who's one of the chalk pitchers today on DK. FanDuel, not quite super chalk, but still double-digit ownership, somewhat popular against the Angels. He is the number one player prop tool in our prop betting model over on Awesemo.com, which is free to use. Logan Gilbert, over 5.5 strikeouts. We have the over with a 33% expected ROI. That seems like a low number considering all the strikeouts that are up for grabs in this Angels lineup. So what do you think of over 5.5 strikeouts for Logan Gilbert, Terry?
I'm guessing I'm going to like that. He's one of my more highly projected pitches. Let's see. Whoops.
Did we break
Actually, you know
something?
what? I accidentally just opened a full window that covered the entire screen, but we're out of there already. We're good. We're good. I've actually got him under that. I'm surprised. I've got him. My model's got him at a 4.98. So call it right at 5. So
Interesting.
A little bit lower than I would have expected. I'm surprised.
Yeah, quite different from what we have in our model, but that still is getting to him a decent clip over on FanDuel at the 8,200 tag.
Yeah, I still have a good projection on him. So I'm curious as to what's going on with this strikeout projection. It's not something I caught earlier in the day to poke around and figure out what's happening that's creating the low strikeout expectation, but the high or reasonably high projection. That's an odd one. You have to get back to you on that one.
All right. Well, at least our prop betting model that does like Logan Gilbert over 5.5 strikeouts. That is a 33% expected ROI. Max Fried is here.
I see what happened.
Oh,
Sorry.
okay. What happened?
I think I fat fingered something and I accidentally had his innings cut. It's an automatic innings pool here, but for some reason it's not at the right thing. So I'm just giving him 5.5 innings and he jumps to 6.21.
All right, now
assuming
there
we
we go.
Assuming we get more than 4.5 innings out of Logan Gilbert, I think we're fine.
Okay, there we go. So now Terry's on board. He also likes the over for Logan Gilbert strikeouts. A little bit of a hairy moment there. It's like, I don't know what's going on. Terry's data way different from the data on the site, but we've spotted the error, especially because I was confused when you said that you had a good projection for him. It's like the logic there doesn't add up. How is he not striking guys out with a good projection? But all right, we've got that squared away. Here's one other guy that I think is kind of interesting is Tony Gonsolin under 4.5 strikeouts. We have that with a 25% expected ROI. I think that Tony Gonsolin is a good pitcher. The concern I have with him is number one, a fantasy option. And the reason our model likes the under here for the strikeouts, he just doesn't pitch very deep into games. They've been pretty cautious with him. And I don't think now is going to be the time where we start to see Tony Gonsolin all of a sudden throw 80 to 90 pitches. So that under 4.5 strikeouts, that also looks like a pretty decent number to me. But Terry, how deep do you think Gonsolin works tonight?
Yeah, I have him going around 4 innings, and I have him going under that 4.5 strikeouts. So I'm with you on that one. I've got him. It's exactly 4.25 actually, and it doesn't change from his implied to his projected.
All right. And by the way, we had Mike Campbell in the YouTube chat said he wants to know what the juice is on these. Minus 125 for Logan Gilbert over 5.5 strikeouts. That is nothing crazy. Tony Gonsolin, the under, minus 138. But with that said, we have it for a 72% expected win rate on the under there. So that's why it has the 25% expected ROI. By the way, let me pull up a prop calculator, an odds calculator, because I think a lot of people, and I've seen this on Twitter too, is a lot of people are just cautious to bet anything that has juice to it on a bet. I don't really care that much, though. To me, it's all about what is the expected odds of the bet winning compared to the break-even point. So, for instance, I just pointed out that our projections have that number hitting the under 72% of the time. So, minus 138. So, according to that, the fair money line for that bet would be minus 257, according to our projections. So when I see something that we have projected to be a minus 257 bet that the books have at minus 138, I don't care that there's a little bit of juice there. That's still positive money. I really don't weigh that much into what the actual odds, like if we have something projected to be minus 900, but the book odds are minus 500, that's still a good bet, even though it's long odds. Actually, I think one of the best bets we've seen the entire season is, I think the player was Phil Gosselin. Do you remember this, Terry, when Alex bet for Phil Gosselin to not hit a homer? He bet it at minus 900, but then I did the math that we had on the site. We had the fair odds for that line at minus 2,100. Alex bet it at minus 900. That's a great bet. I don't care if there's a lot of juice there. It's all about odds and the expected ROI. So
you're just looking to pick that spot off and arbitrage the situation, right? Is that the right word? I'm not a financial guy, but I think that's the right word.
Hey, we're financial guys. You know when we're financial guys? We're financial guys when we're playing DFS over at Jock Market, the presenting sponsor of today's show. If you guys are unfamiliar with Jock Market, this is a different way to play daily fantasy sports, kind of combining the stock market with DFS. There's going to be an IPO period. You bid on players, and then after the slate starts, you could buy and sell shares of the player, and then depending how well they finish at the end of the slate, that's going to determine what your payouts are. And what's great about Jock Market is if you download the app right now, you make your first deposit using the promo code Awesemo, that'll get you a $50 bonus on that first deposit. So we could move on over to the stacks now. And I wanted to bring up, because I saw our guy Nick Engel followed up with a super chat. He said that he has finalized his lineup. It's still Garrett Cole, the pitcher. He's got a San Francisco 4-man stack. His second 4-man stack is the Oakland A's. So we've already talked about the merits of Garrett Cole. We've talked about the merits of San Francisco. But now we can talk about the merits of Oakland over on FanDuel, which is another team that I actually do like getting to as a stack here. We have them projected very, very low ownership, only 0.8% projected ownership for Oakland compared to a 2.5% top stack odds. You've got two positive leveraged offense in there. You've got a positive leveraged pitcher. Those are all things I look for in a GPP lineup. So I say job well done, Nick.
Yeah, I like that. I would be curious which of the Oakland bats got into that. You do get Josh Harrison super cheap up top. I imagine Seth Brown is in there for 2,200, but then we're probably looking at Tony Kemp and or Elvis Andrus in there. So I'm a little bit concerned about the quality that we might be able to put together when we're talking about having Garrett Cole and the Giants in that lineup as well. We're probably not looking at a Matt Olson, Starling Marte combo in there. If somehow you are, I want to learn from you how you magically put that lineup together, because I don't think you can afford it. But if you can, that's a great combination of lineups. I definitely like the spot for the A's here. Nobody's afraid of Zach Greinke at this point. 17% strikeout rate on the season, 4.25 xFIP, 9.1% swinging strikes, 26.7% CSW. This is not a threatening high-end major league pitcher anymore. So yeah, fire away with preferably the top end of the A's bats there. 1 through 6 plays really well. The bottom end of it is a little bit less compelling. Elvis Andrus, I've been bad-mouthing through most of the season, so I don't need to do it here. Tony Kemp actually does create runs 19% above average. He's just not a standout player for like power for individual creation, but for a correlation play from the bottom of the lineup, Tony Kemp is your guy.
Yeah, and by the way, obviously we don't know who's in Nick's lineup, and I don't know that he's going to want to say who every individual piece of the lineup is. But if he says that the lineup works salary-wise, I tend to believe him. And like we said, everything in there is positively leveraged. And let's talk about the San Francisco Giants a little more now that we're on the stacks, because in general, on a slate this size, I'm not looking to stack a team that's projected for nearly 20% ownership. But San Francisco is the most positively leveraged stack on DraftKings in our model. We have them with an 18.2% projected ownership share with a 21% chance to be a top stack. So that has them number one overall leverage score on DK. On FanDuel also, not number one, but still they're looking like a positively leveraged offense. So Terry, you and I, we typically don't like offenses that are this popular on big slates, but are the Giants an exception today?
I mean, I think they have to be. They've been like the best offense in baseball all season long. And if you're getting them to the point where they're ranked that highly, but still coming in at positive leverage, it just makes sense. 204 team ISO, 112 WRC plus, 4.52% home run rate, taking all that action into Coors Field, going up against something called Peter Lambert. Yeah, it just makes so much sense. I actually looked up Lambert earlier because I didn't remember him. Apparently he pitched in 2019, I think it was. I'm just jumping over to Fangraphs to get it back now. It's in my tournament strategy article. He made 19 starts in 2019. 19 starts in 2019, 89 and a third innings pitched. He had a 7.25 ERA for those that care about ERA. He had a 5.29 xFIP and a 5.97 FIP. Those are not good numbers. 6.05 expected ERA. His strikeout rate, not a whole hell of a lot better. 2019 strikeout rate over that sample, 13.6% in the major leagues. This kid is going to get tattooed. He has been brought there to just get lit on fire in this start. Fire away with Giants bats, particularly the ones that you can figure out how to get to them low owned. They play well 1 through 8. So even the guys at the back end of the lineup, Yaz isn't getting a ton of ownership on the DK slate. Brandon Crawford, for whatever, 5,800, I guess is probably the reason, but he's only getting around 11% ownership for that meaty price tag. Awesome year for Brandon Crawford, 218 ISO, 21 home runs, over 510 plate appearances. So use those guys, put them together with the other hitters in the batting order, get them with a low owned pitcher, get them with a low owned second stack, and fire away.
Yeah, I mean, we're in agreement there. It's so rare that there's a team that's projected for like 20% ownership on a 15-game slate, and we have them not only being under-owned, but being the most positively leveraged stack on the entire slate. So to me, yeah, load up on San Francisco. They seem to be a necessary evil today, and there are some lower-owned pitchers that Terry and I said we liked a little bit today. You know, Garrett Cole is going to be expensive, but still, I think he makes sense as a lower-owned starting pitching option. That will reduce the ownership share. A little bit of Giant stacks. And then also, if you want to get to maybe, Carlos Hernandez on DK 5,500, he's only projected for 10% ownership. So, you get two pitchers that are owned right around 10% of the time with a popular offense. It's not really the end of the world in terms of an ownership standpoint. So I don't really mind that kind of setup. I want to ask you about the St. Louis Cardinals because I very rarely, and by the way, they're not on FanDuel. This is just going to be DK specific because FanDuel has, rightfully in my opinion, not included doubleheader games on slates this year. DraftKings does include them, but I very rarely roster hitters from 7-inning games. However, I think the situation is a little bit different just because of the weather conditions. So we have St. Louis today playing in a windy Wrigley Field. And to me, I look at some of these price tags here, and it seems like the pricing has aggressively moved towards the idea that this is a 7-inning game. And DraftKings like, hey, we're just making all these hitters. Like Paul Goldschmidt's $3,300. And that's just incorrect to me considering the weather conditions. A matchup against Zach Davies, who's a pitch to contact type guy. I don't think that plays well in the wind. So would you make an exception to get to the Cardinals in this 7-inning situation?
I would kind of put them in maybe a similar boat to where I'm thinking about the White Sox in terms of I expect Shane Bieber to come out and take 3 innings off the top against the White Sox. I kind of know that the Cards are going to be in a situation where they're going to be playing at least 2 innings short. That said, like you pointed out, they're priced down for this spot, and they're in a great situation with the wind 17 mile an hour. It looks like blowing out to right at Wrigley. I mean, that is ideal for guys like Paul Goldschmidt, Tyler O'Neill, Nolan Arenado to take advantage of. Looking at the confirmed lineup, no Dylan Carlson in the lineup. You got Paul DeJong hiding at the bottom. Tommy Edman up at the top as a decent little correlation play with a little bit of speed. So they're not on my board. I can't get into specific stat lines for everybody. But yeah, we know that they've played maybe a little bit below what their expectations were for Paul Goldschmidt and Nolan Arenado. O'Neill's had a phenomenal season. The 3 of those guys with a couple of these other hitters, I think it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and just to read off that lineup because it came up earlier, and people were asking about what the lineup's going to be. And now people are pointing out that it's out, but it is Edman, Goldschmidt, O'Neill, Arenado, Molina, Bader, Nootbaar, DeJong, and then Jack Flaherty in the pitcher spot. So that is what we have. Which relative to this being a doubleheader game, it's pretty much close to the full lineup that the Cardinals are running out there. So it's not like Arenado or Goldschmidt or any of them are resting. At least in terms of the big boppers in the lineup. But
would you? Sorry, real quick. Just since you mentioned him, I didn't even think of him before because he's not on my board. But would you roster Jack Flaherty at 10-2 in this pitching situation, going up against that terrible Cubs lineup, or are you a little worried about the power that the Cubs do have?
I'm worried about that. Jack Flaherty has not pitched in a month. He made no rehab starts, and last time he pitched, he went 2 innings.
That's right.
So,
yep.
Or else,
take it right out of my head.
Yeah, if he was more straight, like I don't know, I have no clue what we're getting in terms of length from Jack Flaherty today. My gut feeling is we get like 3 or 4 innings, so a little too expensive for me. I think I just put him in the same category as Shane Bieber. Really talented pitcher. Let's see what happens. I understand why the Cardinals are ramping up Jack Flaherty ahead of the playoffs. For the life of me, I have no clue why Bieber's starting today. The Indian season is well over. It's well over. He was dealing with shoulder issues. I just shut him down at this point, but.
And I fear shoulder issues for pitchers, especially like apex pitchers like that. Like that is just that's a career derailer kind of injury. Why they would throw him for this start and risk a prime asset like that is beyond me. But yeah, and just on Flaherty, it is worth noting, like you said, stretching him back out for the playoffs. Only went 2 on that August 24th start. His 2 starts originally back from the first injury, hadn't pitched since May 31st, came back and immediately threw 6 innings twice on the 13th and the 18th of August, then went that short stint on the 24th and has been out ever since. So maybe we see 5 or 6, but yeah, it's not knowing what the expectation is, plus those hitting conditions, plus the salary and all of that. Yeah, you're right. No reason to roster Flaherty here.
Yeah, and that's like I said, Flaherty, Bieber, same situation. Expensive guys, big slate, most likely going to be on a pitch count. But talk to me about some of the other stacks that you really like today. And in particular, I want to ask you about the New York Yankees. There's a team you mentioned that you like today as an under-owned stack over on FanDuel. We have them only project for 1% ownership, 4.6% chance to be a top stack. Very difficult matchup for them against Nathan Eovaldi, but it does appear like they're not picking up that much ownership. DK, a little more popular, but still only 3.9%, nothing crazy. And in general, the Yankees have been a team this year, very high variance offense. They hit a lot of home runs, a ton of upside. When the Yankees are owned, I'm generally not really on them all that heavy. I have my fingers crossed and hoping it's a day where they don't go off and just go crazy. But on days when they're lower owned, I like to get overweight to the Yankees. And this is going to be one of those spots for me, based on some comments you made earlier. It sounds like the same for you.
Yeah, very much so. I wrote up the Yankees as my featured stack in the tournament strategy article. I don't believe in like the reverse jinx, so I couldn't pick the Red Sox here, but that's kind Got to go with my guys. Hopefully I don't actually jinx them. I think they're just under owned for this situation. And I think they're also underpriced for just in general who these hitters are. You're getting a lot of this lineup, everybody except for Aaron Judge under 4,000 on the FanDuel slate, with a lot of them in the lower mid threes. Anthony Rizzo is better than a $3,400 hitter. Joey Gallo is better than a $3,400 hitter. On the DK slate, it's a similar situation. $4,200 Gallo, $4,100 Rizzo, $4,500 Giancarlo Stanton. There are discounts throughout this lineup. DJ LeMahieu at the top of the lineup, super unpopular on this slate, deserves to be unpopular based on how he's underperformed all season long. He's been flat bad for DJ LeMahieu, but as in any given night kind of a play, I mean, is there a better bet in baseball given his hit tool and what we know about this guy over the course of time and his ability to just get on base in front of all these mashers? I think it makes a ton of sense to get there. You're talking about guys in Aaron Judge and Giancarlo Stanton. Judge leads the league with 57.7% hard hit rate on the season. He's got a 17.3% barrel rate. Stanton has a 55.6% hard hit percentage and a 15.3% barrel rate. They've hit a combined 67 home runs over their 1,000 and change plate appearances. They're followed immediately by Joey Gallo and all his power, 38 home runs, a 274 ISO on the season. Gallo is second in baseball in strikeout rate and second in baseball in walk rate among qualified hitters. He's a fascinating guy, the prototype of a 3 true outcomes hitter. Gleyber Torres, massively disappointing this season. The power is just gone. And then it kind of bottoms out with Gio and with Brett Gardner. Brett's been a lot better for the second half. He's like at a 13% above average WRC plus over the second half, 160 some odd plate appearances. So he's rounded up his game a little bit. And then you get Higgy in this lineup. It's the least data-driven thing I'm ever going to say on one of these shows. Just feeling like it's a Higgy kind of a night. Higgy's a 184, 254, 408 hitter this season, but he's got a 223 ISO, 10 home runs, and he's just one of those guys that just happens to seem to come through in big spots, which is not data-driven and is a stupid thing to say about any baseball player. Clutch doesn't exist. I can prove it with math, but feels like a Higgy night, and he's only 2,000.
That was a thesis paper for me in my senior year of college. I did a whole report on it and went through all this data. I went through all the data of, FanGraphs has high leverage stats for players. Went through all of it to find which players were statistically better in high leverage situations compared to normal leverage. And there was a couple of them, except I think it could generally just be considered outliers. But there were certain ones I thought it's funny, like Derek Jeter was statistically worse in high leverage situations than he was in all other situations, which does not fit the narrative. But that's overall what the numbers showed.
Took the words out of my mouth with that example. I was just going to say, for a Derek Jeter fan to say that clutch doesn't exist, you can't you can't say that I don't make arguments that hurt my side or my emotional investments.
Yeah, or my NFT investments over on DraftKings. But let's walk through some of these other stacks. And the Colorado Rockies are a team, they look vastly different on DK versus FanDuel. FanDuel, they look about appropriately owned at 4.2% ownership. On DraftKings, though, this is a ridiculously popular team to the point where we now have them negatively with the most negatively leveraged score by a pretty wide margin. We've got the Rockies over on DK, 10.6% projected ownership with a 3.4% chance to be a top stack. So, Terry, I know that you primarily play over on FanDuel, but for this DraftKings slate, how would you be handling Rockies guys when you just look at some of the price tags on these guys? Brendan Rodgers, 3,700. CJ Cron, 3,400. Raimel Tapia, 3,200. These guys are so cheap over on DK that it's leading to this becoming a massively popular team. I understand why, but is it too much ownership for you to feel comfortable with?
So I think if you were looking at the overall ownership for the team, it's telling a different story than what we see if we start looking at some of the individual ownership on some of these guys. Charlie Blackmon in the heart of that order for only 5.2% ownership. I know it's lefty. I just don't care. He's cheap and he's hitting cleanup in this lineup. You can get to Brendan Rodgers at only 11 and change ownership. He's also cheap. He's hitting second in this lineup. If you're a Raimel Tapia fan, you can take him off the top. He's got a little bit of speed, a little bit of on-base acumen, doesn't create runs all that well, 24% worse than average. It's not a good lineup, but you do get quality against left-handed pitching. They're going up against a relatively good left-handed pitcher. Alex Wood has a 25.6% strikeout rate and a 3.58 xFIP on the season. But Colorado, overall for the season, only a 20.7% strikeout rate against lefties for the active roster and a 184 team ISO, a 3.81% home run rate that's around the league average. They create runs 4% worse than average. I think you could do worse in terms of a team that might get you a couple of runs, hit you a couple of home runs, blow up the opposing pitcher, get the benefit of Coors Field. If you're threading together those lower owned plays along with these guys, I think you can get there on the DK slate and certainly on the FanDuel where they're all significantly lower owned. So I think you can get there. Just pay attention to the individual ownership.
Yeah, and I agree with what you're saying. Certainly some individual guys who are going to be really popular. Trevor Story in particular, that's just a ridiculous price tag. At least cash games, I certainly think the Rockies make a whole bunch of sense to save salary with. But FanDuel, is this a team where they have lower ownership that you like them just because of the upside at Coors Field, where the overall amount that these players are in lineups is less of a concern?
Yeah, they're at slightly positive ownership or around efficient ownership. And again, it's just a sample. Highest owned guy in the team is Trevor Story again, but he's at half the ownership that he is on the DK slate. Everybody else in the single digits. It's easy enough to put together unique combinations of these hitters on the FanDuel slate. Relatively, they're a little bit more expensive maybe with Crone at 37, Story at 4,000 than what they appear on the DK slate for the different relative caps. But there's a ton of cheap value toward the back end of the lineup. Sam Hilliard, a ton of power. Elias Diaz has a little bit of pop from the catcher spot. So you can get to cheap bats. You can put these guys together pretty easily with a lot of other teams that we want to get to.
Yeah, and I do view the Rockies, like I said, much differently on DK versus FanDuel. Where FanDuel is just, is this a good spot for them because they're at Coors Field and they're facing a left-handed pitcher? The Rockies' offense much better against lefties than righties, and then also just not that popular. But on DK, it's funny how DFS works sometimes because in baseball, which I think a lot of people kind of don't think of it this way, but it's at least how I think that. I'm not trying to predict outcomes. I'm trying to predict outcomes relative to how popular players are. And on DraftKings, the Rockies are cheaper, so they become less appealing in the long run because that means that the field is all getting to them at a higher clip. So it's kind of weird how that kind of logic works. You just think, hey, cheaper, therefore I want to play them. It's like, yeah, but at what percentage do you no longer want to play them as much? And to me, that's where some of those guys like Trevor Story being 20% owned, that kind of starts to get past that break-even point. But Terry, give me another team that you're getting to at a pretty high clip. In terms of your most rostered offenses today, is there anyone that we have not talked about that is a pivotal part of your lineups?
Let's see what's coming up in the old crunch here. Looks like I'm getting a fair amount of Twins and Rays, which is not overly surprising with how I normally get things. One that's maybe a little surprising I wasn't necessarily expecting to see in here is the New York Mets. Wasn't really paying attention to them as a matchup going up against Eric Lauer. Certainly not a overly threatening pitcher there by any means. I'm just trying to jump over to them and find them on my board. So Mets on the road going into Milwaukee. You get a reasonably close version of the Mets' best lineup with Nimmo, Lindor, Javi Baez, Pete Alonso, Michael Conforto in there. Jonathan Villar hitting sixth in the lineup today. Jeff McNeil down at the bottom. So there are some bats to string together. Certainly we get a ton of power around Baez, Alonso, Lindor, whether Lindor's come through for you or not this season. You can't argue with his career track record. And he's up to a 172 ISO, 17 home runs. So I would stick to various versions of this Mets lineup together. Going up against Eric Lauer, 23.8% strikeout rate, a 4.25 xFIP, gives up a reasonable barrel rate at 8.8%. So not a major upside spot, but also one that's maybe somewhat interesting here. And they're not drawing any ownership whatsoever.
Yeah, I am not getting to the Mets today. And it's a couple of reasons. Number one, I think that Eric Lauer is a decent enough starting pitcher. Then number two, the Brewers have a good bullpen behind him. So, I mean, whenever a team is 1% owned in the aggregate, there's always reason to say, hey, they're contrarian. It's very rare that a team only has 1% chance to be a top stack. But on a 15-game slate, I just can't roster everybody. I have to make the cut somewhere. And the Mets are not a team that really make it for me. But I want to follow up with you about the Tampa Bay Rays because they are going up against so they're going up against Edward Cabrera, who is a young starting pitcher that I like quite a bit as a prospect. He appears to have good stuff. We've seen him have good results. However, earlier in the day on the strategy show, I thought that Adam brought up a pretty good point about Edward Cabrera, is that if you look at his numbers this year, they've been, fine, except, wait, am I looking at?
Are you looking at Edouard Cabrera? Possibly. There was once an Edouard Cabrera. I think I have the correct guy in front of me. 20 and a third innings over 5 starts, 17.4% strikeout rate, 14.1% walks, 13.6% barrel rate, 45.8% hard hit.
Never mind. There was something, I think I'm tripped up on something because Adam had pointed out that I must be thinking of somebody else, of a pitcher who had splits where he was much better as a starter than much better as a reliever than a starter. But I guess it wasn't Cabrera because Cabrera's only made starts this year. But that aside, Edward Cabrera is a young pitcher with really good stuff that I do like the prospects of going forward. One of the top overall pitching prospects in baseball. However, it has not yet really led to strikeouts in the way that you would expect. So a pitcher has a 97 mile per hour average fastball velocity. You would just think this guy's striking out everybody, and he did in the minor leagues, but it has not translated to strikeouts yet so far in the big leagues, only a 17.4% strikeout rate, and he's really nibbling a lot. So 14.1% walk rate, maybe because he hasn't been able to generate strikeouts at quite the same level he did in the minor leagues. He's less confident to throw the ball in the strike zone, but we've seen the Tampa Bay Rays really feast on some pitching, especially when they're a lower owned offense. They always have some upside. So to me, I'm totally on board with you, given that the strikeouts for Cabrera have just not translated in the big leagues to this point.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it makes sense. And, the contact profile is just sitting right now. It's a very small sample. It's somewhat unfair to do this to the kid, but he's ridiculously targetable with a 45.8% hard hit. He comes in at a negative 10.3 in my BBB minus K metric. And we've been getting to this Rays team all season long. They mark out well for power. You've got 5 guys in the lineup over a 10 in my home run model. Brandon Lau, you get Wander Franco back from the injured list in the middle of the lineup, or hitting second in the lineup, rather. G-Man Choi with his power, Nelson Cruz, obvious power, Austin Meadows, obvious power, Randy Arozarena, good power. Back end, a little bit clunkier with Joey Wendell, Francisco Mejia, Kevin Kiermaier is going to try and steal the strategy card from the other team again. I think it's a good spot to go.
So I'm totally on board with you there. And the chat is calling for Dong picks, so I want to do that. But before we do, first to tie a bow on the stacks here, Terry, any other offenses you want to bring up before we announce who's going yard tonight?
It looks like I'm getting to a fair amount of the Twins. Another one that I hadn't really glanced too deeply into, but that's a game that I just like kind of both sides of in terms of the power upside with the Blue Jays on the other side of that one. They're not getting crazy ownership up and down going up against Bailey Ober here. That's a targetable spot to me. I think there's certainly plenty of power in that lineup. Obviously, 9.6% barrel rate and a 42.6% hard hit yielded by Ober so far. 25.1 strikeout rate is good, but I think that's a targetable spot. And then I'm getting more Twins than I expected to going up against Jose Barrios. I haven't put it through the filtering process, but just in terms of where they came up in Fantasy Cruncher. And now that I'm seeing the prices at the bottom of their lineup, I'm guessing it's largely driven by that. On FanDuel, you've got 23, 23, 21, 21 to round out the bottom of the lineup, plus Luis Arias at 2,200 on the top of it. So probably just coming up a lot as a value play for me with higher end, a lot of Garrett Cole and Twins, I would imagine, type of stacks.
Yeah, so I think that's also plenty reasonable. Minnesota Twins, not a team that's grading out super highly for me personally. Only a 1% chance being a top stack in our tools, but once again, very, very low ownership on them. And you could kind of reason playing anybody when they're projected for less than 1% ownership as a team. But guys, it is time to get to some of these dong picks. But first, you could get access to all of the tools we have over at Awesemo.com by signing up for an Awesemo Plus weekly pass for $29.95. That'll get you premium content for just about every single DFS sport out there. And if you're new to Awesemo Plus Platinum, you can use the promo code MLB Live Before Lock. That's all one word, all capital letters, MLB Live Before Lock. That'll get you 25% off your first week of Awesemo Plus Platinum. And if you're only looking to play MLB as the season winds down, you get an MLB Plus Awesemo package for just $4.95 weekly. Stop guessing, start winning, join Awesemo Plus today. All right, Terry, here it is. This is the moment that everybody has always been waiting for. It seems like as soon as we start the show, and really something that Butthole Jenkins has done, where he's always, cut the crap, who's the best play of the day. Everybody comes in, they just want to know the dong picks, and it's dong pick time. So who is number one overall in your model for home runs today?
Number one overall in the model happens to be the same guy that I picked. It's super obvious, one of my more obvious ones of the year, but at least he's going off at very low ownership, under 3% as of my last update on the FanDuel slate. That's Mr. Future. It won't happen this year, but future Triple Crown winner, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. It is an easy one. The Blue Jays are up toward the top of my board. Nelson Cruz is up there from the Rays, who we talked about, Kyle Schwarber. Who do you like?
Is your dog sleep barking again?
He's awake barking. He's been sitting here licking my hand for the last 20 minutes because he needs to go out.
All right. Well, fair enough. Do you think he agrees or disagrees with your home run pick? Was that the Was that little bark in approval or disapproval?
I think he was doing what chat's doing and probably just calling me a chalk donkey on that one. But hey, sometimes you just got to go with the easy picks.
All right. And by the way, some ones in the YouTube chats bring up also Jonathan Adams, who's calling out a couple of home runs. He's gone with Ketel Marte. He's got Nick Gordon. Arca Felza's calling Salvador Perez. Joseph is not only giving us a JT or a middle home run pick, he's doubling down on it, saying 2 stolen bases. So that's something new that we haven't seen here. He's calling for home runs and stolen bases from somebody. But let me see, who do I have in my lineups as a reasonable? By the way, like if I just go through the actual top, it's just all people at Coors Field, but that's a coward's answer. I'm not going to go down the Eric Lindquist path and just be like, I think he's going to hit a home run today, Trevor Story. Like, no, I gotta put some balls on this pick, right? Let's see, who am I getting to at a good clip that is not just massively popular here? How about Adolis Garcia, who I'm overweight to the field to right now? We've got Garcia. He's not homered in a little bit of a period of time. Still a little bit expensive, but as a low-owned play, he is somebody that I'm overweight to the field on. If he wasn't on the Texas Rangers this year, I think people would really be talking about him as one of the better young power hitters in baseball, because Adolis Garcia has had a very strong offensive season in terms of power, but it's just kind of gone unnoticed because he plays in Texas. Like, he's got fairly long Rookie of the Year odds, and I think Randy Arozarena should win the award, but still he's somebody who has overall had a pretty solid year. That getting slept on a little bit. I got him in more about double the lineups compared to the field, so that's going to be my home run call. I'm going to read off a few more that we have in here, and then we could call it a night. But John Wick saying Nick Castellano stinger, Michael Knack, he's going for Cole Calhoun, Thomas Tyner, he's got Mitch Haniger hitting a home run. So lots of wide range of outcomes. And by the way, nobody's being soft like Eric Lindquist and just calling for Coors Field home runs. I dig it. Guys, that is going to do it for us today. Thank you very much for watching. On the way out, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and stick around because we've got the College Football Live Before Lock show coming up later.